I saw this coming probably a decade ago. This has been in the works. National standards has been a goal for what I would call education reformers. Certain education reformers have always wanted to have national standards. So this came as no surprise to me, although it sounds like it's becoming quite a surprise to a lot of people. I'm not surprised by that either, because I knew that it would create controversy. And a set of national standards is going to create controversy. So backing up just a little bit, just to kind of give you a little bit of background information on like No Child Left Behind, because without really understanding No Child Left Behind, it's a little difficult, I think, to understand how we got to Common Core. Under No Child Left Behind, that was passed into law. It was passed into law by the Congress and signed into law by the President. And basically what it did is it said that each state had to come up with their own academic standards, and then that they would have to test on those academic standards. And so that's what each state did. They came up with their own academics in math, science, English, social studies, the core subjects. And then what we would do is we would all kind of come up with our own testing. It was a national test.
We just have a quick announcement, because
Okay.
we can park on the ball field, but we have a car blocking it. It's a Nissan, and the license plate is 358-7651.
Not me.
If we could just get that moved, people can park on the ball field.
What kind of Nissan?
It's over here on the side here.
On that side?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What is?
So No Child Left Behind was a law that basically said that each state had to develop their own standards and test on those standards. So we pretty much had control over our standards. We developed those standards within the state and tested on those standards every year. There was also a national test, but nothing was really tied to that national test. It was called the NAEP. What we used in New Hampshire to test students was called the NECAP, so you might be familiar with that. Because some states developed standards that were considered quality standards, and some were considered not so quality standards, maybe some were actually pretty darn bad, there was this call for a national standard. You know, if you're going to have some states doing this to students and some states setting the bar here for students, we need to nationalize standards. That was kind of the argument. However, if you go back in history and you look, you can see that within the states, there was momentum building to actually improve standards. So was it really needed? One can argue certainly not, because if you have a governor who's willing to lead your state to high quality standards, like what we saw in some of the states like Massachusetts, California had elevated their standards to some of the best in the country, it can be done within the state. It takes pressure, it takes political leadership, but it can be done. There was really no need to nationalize standards. It was used as an excuse, certainly, to do it, but I just wanted you to kind of have that background as to how, you know, and there was other reasons for this. Some of the reasons were that students move from state to state. So if they're in a state that's using high standards, and what if they move to a state with low standards, or vice versa? You know, some kids will be behind, and that happens. However, you know, so the argument is if we nationalize standards, we're going to get everybody pretty much on the same page. The problem is the national standards weren't the best standards that we saw out there. Okay, so that's one of the problems. The other problem was states that reject Common Core. And if states, New Hampshire has Common Core, but what if a state, and some states did, Texas rejected Common Core from the very beginning. They elevated their standards. So what? Now their students are going to be at an advantage compared to New Hampshire because we're using the national standards, which are pretty much mediocre and almost bad in some circumstances, because we're seeing some serious problems with the standards as far as not being developmentally appropriate for some children. So those were some of the arguments used, and you can see where the problems with those arguments are now coming to fester, because while yes, we can move around from state to state, that might have been their reasoning, but now our children in New Hampshire could be at a serious disadvantage if other states elevate their standards. So how did these national standards come about? Where did we get Common Core? There's federal laws opposing national curriculum, there's 3 federal laws. So how do you get around that? Well, what you do is you find a big financier, Bill Gates, and you have him pay for it. And so what he did is he went to, and he funded the National Governors Association, the NGA, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. These are 2 trade organizations. They are lobbying organizations. They are not accountable to anybody. You cannot get information from them. You cannot figure out the process that they went through to develop these standards because they are not subjected to the open record laws that we have in this state. For instance, if the state would have done this at the state level, you would be able to get that information. So keep that in mind, that this was done behind closed doors. Confidentiality agreements were signed by many of the participants who participated in this, so they can't share information with you. So a lot of this was done without any kind of public input, any kind of public overseeing any of this process. To get states to sign on, because, they developed these national standards. Now how do we get states to sign on to this? Well, it's simple. You dangle money out there. Because what I have learned as a researcher is everything in education is driven by money. And make no mistake about that. Not your children's best interest, by money. And I've seen that in Concord, and I've seen that from both parties, and I've seen that in the federal level and in your local school districts. Money drives everything in education. And make no mistake about that. And if you as a parent do not stand up for your kids, nobody will, because they care about the money. So how do you get states to adopt standards that aren't even the best in the country? How do you get states to adopt standards that most people in the states hadn't even seen? The commissioner, or the superintendent, I'm not sure what his title was in Texas, has publicly stated that they wanted him to sign on to these standards before they were ever released to the public. Okay, for money, race to the top money, if to be specific. So they dangled $4.35 million out there for race to the top money, billion. Did I say million? Sorry, billion. to adopt these standards. Along with the standards, the states had to develop teacher evaluations. Okay, and those teacher evaluations had to be tied to the new tests that were also being developed and paid for by the federal government. So, looking at the race to the top money, that's a pretty big carrot to wave in front of a state that is desperate, because this is when the economy had bottomed out. This was several years ago when we were desperate, when states were desperate for money. So immediately, they were rushing this through, trying to get this money, and New Hampshire applied for it, did set up a state longitudinal database to share information, to collect information on students. Started up or developed a teacher model evaluation plan, and the standards, sign on to the standards. New Hampshire received not a dime from Race to the Top money. We had done pretty much everything that I'm sure that the state thought would be okay, and we didn't receive a dime. So all of this is now falling on you, the local taxpayers. And they will tell you, well, this isn't really going to cost you any money because these are things that you would have to do anyway. I live in Bedford, and I check the budget every year, and I can tell you that I've seen line items directly related to Common Core. So I don't know about your district. I would say look at your line items and start questioning how much this is costing you. The tests are computerized. That means that you're going to have to spend a lot of money. That's where a lot of the money is going, to new technology, to upgrade, because all the kids have to now take this on computers. So Race to the Top was the first carrot that they dangled out there. We didn't get any money. And to make sure that states complied and did what the federal government wanted them to do, they then began issuing No Child Left Behind waivers. Now remember, this is a law. Now I don't like the law. I don't know, I pretty much can't find anybody who likes the law now. But now there's a waiver from a federal law. Instead of the federal government saying, we need to repeal this law, the Department of Education just decided to take it upon themselves, ignore the law, and issue a waiver So the states lined up, the governors lined up, the departments of education lined up, and they started applying for waivers that I think Senator Rubio called illegal. You're basically going around a law, ignoring it. So again, what are we going to do for a waiver? Make sure the standards are there. Make sure the testing that you are now using the new national tests. Make sure that you are tying a teacher's evaluation to those tests, and make sure that you are data collecting. Those are the prime reasons that, or the prime strings, I would say, that were attached to the money and to the No Child Left Behind waivers. So New Hampshire applied for them. I would suggest going and reading what you signed away, what your governor and what your Department of Education signed away in state rights and local rights, if you wanted a clear vision of what has been removed and handed over to the federal government. And I can tell you, in that application, there's things in there that you will read that are directly coming from the federal government, basically saying, here's our agenda. And so what the Department of Education did, said, well, here's what we're doing in our state to meet what the federal government wants our schools to do. So if you think that this doesn't affect local control, you're sadly mistaken. Go read the application. So that's kind of so when you hear that, the federal government's involved, or that, the federal government's pushing this, and they'll say, oh no, this is state-driven, read the application. Read the memorandum of understanding that we signed with the new testing consortium. Look at what we agreed to. Look at the Race to the Top application. Those waivers, by the way, can be revoked, and they have been revoked by the Secretary of Education. And they've been revoked in a couple of states. And one of the main reasons for revoking them is because they want to target teachers. They want those teachers tied to the test. Because you see, when you have a good teacher in the classroom, and maybe the curriculum isn't something of quality that they want to teach, all you have to do is say, well, you're going to be evaluated on this Common Core test. And what do you think a teacher's going to do? If you're being evaluated, and you're going to be hired and fired, or you're going to be told that you're ineffective, what are you going to do? There's a whole system now in place to drive this agenda. Make no mistake about it. The school districts, there are school districts that are backing out in New Hampshire, but there is such an entrenched agenda and reform going on in your schools right now that even if you say no to this, and you can as a district, you can say no, and several districts have, it's extremely difficult to do because you are forced to take that test. Your kids are now forced to take that test. I'm sorry, your school district is now forced to administer that test. You do not have to let your kids take that test. So let me be clear about that. So that's what's basically the background of this. I just want to hit on a couple points, and then I'm going to turn it over because I can go on for hours. Common Core is a set of standards, and right now they're English and math. Social studies and science are to come, and if you think that English and math are bad, look out, because I can tell you that the science and social studies are far worse. There was 2 people who sat on the validation committee for the math and English. There were 2 content experts who had helped develop standards in this country, the best standards in the country. When I mentioned Massachusetts or when I mentioned California, these individuals were involved. They were the only 2 content experts. And what I mean by that is there is a difference between somebody who holds a PhD in education, and nothing against them, I just want to be very clear about this, and someone who holds a PhD in mathematics. They're very different. One has specialized, one understands mathematics. One who has a degree in education would be more specialized in education. So I want to be clear that these 2 content experts that sat on the Math Validation Committee and the English Validation Committee both held PhDs in those content fields. Everybody else pretty much did not. There was testing, people involved with testing. The 2 content experts refused to sign off on these standards, saying that they are not good enough to be in our schools. They know what good quality standards look like. and they said that these are not up to par. They were being sold as internationally benchmarked standards. And when the question was asked, internationally benchmarked to who? To what country? Third world countries? The countries that are finishing top in the world? Where would, I still have yet to see what countries these are internationally benchmarked. So they refused to sign off on the standards. They are now in our schools. And since then, they've been talking out about this, and can talk so much, but again, they signed a confidentiality agreement, so there's certain things that they can't talk about. So the quality of the standards just simply are not there. What we're seeing is a real problem in the math. A real problem in the math. If your kids are bringing home math that you don't understand, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. That's called Common Core math. Now, bad math has been around before Common Core. I actually have kept my kids out of schools based on what math textbook they've used. And my kids are in college now. But bad math has been around a long time. Unfortunately, we're not getting rid of it. Unfortunately, you can go to the internet and just search Common Core, lousy math or something. You can go to Facebook page, it's called Inappropriate Common Core Lessons. And you will see parent after parent posting their children's homework. We had a hearing, 1508, it was a bill this last session, tried to terminate Common Core. We had parent after parent in New Hampshire bringing in their children's homework. And one parent said that her husband was a graduate of Harvard with an MBA and was having difficulty figuring out his second grader's homework assignment, questions on there, because they're so confusing. And I will just say that I've tutored kids in math, so it's something I tend to focus on. I won't focus so much on the English because that's not my subject. But there's nothing good about confusing kids. It either drives them to tutors, for parents who can afford them, of course, or they get left behind. They end up hating math. I've seen it. I've seen kids, I've worked with kids, I know what this does, and this has been pre-Common Core. I haven't worked with them under Common Core, but I've seen the samples coming up. I've seen the examples from parents, and I understand what the problem is. So within these standards, we're seeing extremely confusing math coming from them in the curriculum, in the form of the curriculum, and a lot of explain your answers. So they're being asked, little kids, explain what this means. Little kids can't explain why 2 + 2 = 4. I would suggest that might not even be something that comes easily to most people. I mean, can you explain a fraction? I'm sure everybody knows how to, well, maybe not everybody knows how to multiply fractions, but can you kind of explain that? I mean, putting that into words. There's a professor out of Johns Hopkins, his name is Stephen Wilson, and I know him, and I consult with him often, and he wrote an original or an analysis of the test that your kids are going to be taking. And he said there's too much focus on communication skills and not enough focus on computation skills. And so that's kind of what he's gearing at, that you're asking kids to do things that really have nothing to do with math. And it was interesting, a couple nights ago I attended a Manchester school board meeting, and a high school math teacher got up and spoke about this. And she said, and she's a great math teacher, I know, because my son had her in high school. And she got up and she said, you're doing a real disservice to these kids, because what if you get a kid in, we're talking about Manchester, so they get a lot of kids, immigrants, who does not speak the language well. You're going to penalize them for not being able to communicate. They may be brilliant in mathematics. I mean, I know a lot of kids who are brilliant, I didn't have to work with them, but in mathematics, but they might not be able to explain. And what I mean by explain, because I want to be very clear about this, as a tutor, I would tell kids that I needed to see every step. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, because putting every step of the problem is important, because that's where you can see where they've made their mistake. I'm talking literally about explain, just really be able to understand the problem. And this is extremely difficult for little kids, especially. And as they get older, it's still, I know algebra, I can do algebra problems, and I'm not sure I can explain it very well. And I think when you get to the higher level, when you're talking about engineers and going into the math field, that's obviously where it becomes more important. And I'm not saying that you don't have to explain anything, but I really want you to take a look at that, because I think that that's where, well, I know that's where a lot of the problems are coming from. So I just wanted to touch on that. There's a definite decrease in fictional and classical literature that will be coming, and in place of informational texts. So they're really driving what is going on in your classroom. And so, that's what I want to make clear is that, if you think that you are controlling what is going to go on in your classroom, that's going to be very difficult. Because they may say, yes, come in parents, we want to hear from you. But now the teacher's tied to this test. The test is forced upon the school. So, and if the school is not complying and your children aren't doing well on this test, and it may not be because they don't know math. It may be because they can't explain it. So I want to be very clear about that. There was one last thing I wanted to hit on before I turned it over. Now I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But those are the main problems, is the quality of the standards are just simply not there. We know that. We know there's organizations that have supported Common Core. Fordham Institute is one of them. However, if you dig a little deeper, and Professor Wilson, John Hopkins that I mentioned earlier, he did the analysis for Fordham, has publicly stated that there are states that had better standards in place. Better quality. Oh, this is what I wanted to tell you. The math standards, for instance, they end at Algebra 2, and Algebra 2 is not even completed. That means that there are no, there's a little bit of trigonometry standards. There are no pre-calculus and there are no calculus standards. So that means that these standards, as they are written, do not prepare students for the STEM careers, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Because you need that in high school in order to qualify for the top colleges. Now I can tell you, the top private schools will not touch this. They will not touch it with a 10-foot pole. Call Phillips Exeter and ask them if they're using Common Core. The answer is going to be no, because I've already called them and asked them. They're not going to touch it. Their kids are going to go to the prestigious schools, that the public schools, well, too bad for you. So keep that in mind. Where the president's kids go, they're not using it. So that's something to note. Algebra 1, for instance, is if you follow the Common Core standards, you get to Algebra 1 by 9th grade. That's 2 years behind the top performing countries, at least. At least. So the goal was, prior to Common Core, and you can see it in the California standards, the goal was to get them through Algebra 1 by 8th grade so they can get to those STEM preparation math courses, which is Algebra 1 in 8th grade, Geometry in 9th grade, Algebra 2 in 10th grade, Pre-Calculus in 11th, and Calculus in 12th. That puts a kid now at on the same page as your kids in Phillips Exeter. So now your kids get to compete with the wealthy families. But that's not what you got with Common Core. That's not what you got. When you nationalize things, you tend to see that the nationalization ends up going like this instead of like this. Okay, in Massachusetts, what they did when they developed some of the best standards in the country, instead of going like this, they went like this. They developed the best, some of the best that we've seen in this country. So make no mistake about it. Oh, in the geometry, well, I'll just hit on that a little bit. I'm not a geometry person. I love algebra. So I'm not real clear about this. But what I've gathered from the mathematicians is the geometry has been, it's the places where it's been tried in other countries, it's been a failure. It's not Euclidean. It's a different type of geometry, and I would suggest researching it because I think it's a little hard for me to fully explain it. But so look at geometry. Look at the geometry that's coming into your school. I'm told by the mathematicians that a lot of teachers aren't even qualified to teach it.
And I can do a little geometry.
Okay. And I think that's basically it. So, yep, jump in.
Geometry. I'm going to cheer you up after that. Their geometry is inductive. So you look at this example, this example, this example, and you extrapolate from that and you get a hypothesis. So you're building up from the ground up, and they're teaching geometry that way. Normally when you've had it in high school, they give you a theorem, they give you a postulate. You're working from the top down, deducing. It's just backwards from what we've been used to. It's never been tested and tried successfully anywhere. But this is just one generation, we'll just throw them out. I'm sorry, but that's the attitude. I was a homeschooler. I've got 6 kids. I started in 1990 with an absolutely abhorrent law. I refused to comply with it because it was unconstitutional. I helped empower other parents not to comply, because once you complied, you're genuflecting to the state, you're saying, whatever you want, I'll do it, because you're giving them jurisdiction over your family. All my kids were homeschooled. They never took me to court. I've gone to court helping defend people who begged permission, asked the state, could I pretty please do this? Initially, we had to show them our curriculum and get that approved. And then we went back and we got tested at the end of the year to see if we're progressing according to our child's age and ability, whatever that is, which is unconstitutionally vague. And then they punitively put us on probation if we didn't do as well enough that they thought was good, or terminate us. So forget that. Anybody who went that route would go in court if they did badly, or they would just hide and cower. Half the community is underground, still is. 2 years ago, we put in a law. Get rid of probation, get rid of termination. Now you have to have an annual evaluation. You put it in your back pocket because it's private, right? Because he's gone in public school. I thought I retired 2 years ago, and then I found out about Common Core. This is a nightmare, but there's good news. They've taken FERPA, which protects families, Federal Act, Education Rights and Privacy Act. They've torched them, not by Congress, by this Obama administration. It could be anybody's administration. I mean, Bush did as many bad things as Obama, so I don't mean to pick on Obama, but his administration has torched that. So the data mining in April of 2012, New Hampshire went online. They have a P20 database, preschool or birth or prenatal, whatever they want the P to stand for. It stands for a lot of different things. And 20, and now they're talking, I heard somebody talking about 27 because you still get insurance at 27. So don't worry, they'll keep in track of it till you're 40 or 50 or maybe dead. Because this is lifelong learning, workforce training for lifelong labor. This is not education, so you can be a good citizen and run your government, because this is self-government by the people. So the biggest thing that I can do for you is to encourage you to believe that you can flip this, not to get you depressed, which is easy to do. How did it come in New Hampshire? Race to the top. We lost that, and then we have a waiver. And listen to this. This is in the waiver. This is New Hampshire ESEA Flexibility Waiver. Now, this was finalized in 2013. It's the No Child Left Behind waiver. It's got fancy names. 5 regional liaisons are the newest addition to the support and outreach for implementing Common Core. This is the Commissioner's extended network. These regional liaisons participate in monthly superintendent, principal, and curriculum instruction and assessment meetings that take place in each district. So our commissioner, without any authority at the legislature, has used federal funds to create this regional group that comes to your district, doesn't talk to the parents, doesn't tell you what's going on, doesn't tell your school board, your elected representatives, or your state legislature elected representatives. They go straight to your supers and all those important people, and they tell them to put it in. So first thing you know, it's like, how did it get there? Everybody's asking, how did it get there? Money, the waiver. It's insidious, it's backwards, it's not transparent. This whole thing with Achieve Inc. developing them, and we can't change those standards, this is undermining your form of government. You should have open, transparent government. You should be able to amend those if you don't. They shouldn't even be there. They violate 3 federal laws. Okay. Now, we had a hearing. These came out in July of 2010. They're 60 pages each. Now, if you divide that by 12, that's about 5 pages per year. Those were drafts. Those weren't complete. 5 pages for kindergarten, 5 pages for 8th grade, 5 pages for 12th grade. For math, I'm sorry, but that's not comprehensive. So they didn't see them in New Hampshire. They approved them based on this little draft, and they had a public hearing. So don't worry, you could have gone to the public hearing. They had a public hearing a week later after they got them. Do you know how many members of the public went? Then a month later, they had a second one because they needed to talk about math and then English. That many people came again. And then they voted 4-1 and they adopted them. You're stuck.
In July.
In July of 2010.
And everyone's on
July
vacation.
8th, 2010. That's not transparent government. They didn't try to, if they wanted to, and they do this for rules, they have meetings all over the state. They make sure you hear about it. They get you in. I asked Heather Gage last time I saw her, I said, when was the testing hearing on the Smarter Balance? See, we have Smarter Balance. Half the country has Park, and half the country has Smarter Balance. When did we have a hearing? Oh, I'm sure she had one, she said. It's not in the minutes. It never was there. I know where the P20 longitudinal database went in April of 2012. There are 400 data points on your child. 400 data points on your child. Every child gets that. Isn't that wonderful? And that's the politics of the family. Do they vote? The income, the religion, all this kind of stuff, because it's interwoven in the subjects. They can call it English, but they put history in there. There was one thing about a grammar, possessive nouns, and they talk about the poor president. He has so much responsibility, all in terms of possessive nouns. And it concluded like that, the president acts for the good of the country. They're propagandizing. It's riddled in there. Because there is 80% of all your textbooks comes from one publisher in this country, Pearson. Canada, Pearson owns 100% of the market. It's not over. It sounds like it's over, but it's not. Okay, so Smarter Balance. They said that we're taking that in the spring of 2015. They need 90 to 95% compliance to validate this thing. Because if you look at their own chart, it's not validated yet. They had pilots, they had field testing. Next year is the big test. If we get 5 to 10% of you that say no thank you, and you have the right to refuse, to opt out, however you want to call it, because it's your right to direct the education of your child, and Supreme Court decisions have said that over and over again. They can't validate this, because they say somewhere in 2016 that they're finally verified. Our state law, RSA 193C, says that these state assessments that they're mandated to do in the districts have to be valid. They're not valid. Appropriate. My district is saying that they're inappropriate. They're cognitively inappropriate. You're asking kids to do abstraction too young. They get stressed out. They have this chronic stress. That's why some of them are freaking out in New York, because they got raised to the top money. They're 2 years ahead of us. They're just besides themselves. They want to get rid of it. This is Nashua. This is what they said. Teachers took the test, and they came out with their comments. Shockingly negative experience. Total grade level inappropriate. Difficult even for some teachers with advanced degrees. Seems the test was designed more as a psychological or sociological experiment, not as a measure of academic learning. Who created this test anyway? It couldn't have been professional educators, don't worry, it wasn't. It was Pearson. Remember that? Would be a crushing emotional experience for my students. It's nothing less than child abuse. And remember, they're mandatory reporters. They're supposed to report child abuse, but they don't report it up. They only report it down on parents. Something wrong with that law. I refuse to administer this assessment to my students. They have no choice. These teachers are going to collect, their comments and give them to the state. The state's not going to do anything. I heard from the executive director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. He came on to Deb Olszta, she's taping this. He came on to her show, and he said that New Hampshire used to elect their state board of education. Maybe we need to go back to that because they're not listening to us. And the state board elected the commissioner of education, who says that we're enough already, we're being unruly and we need you to just shut up and go away. When these were passed in 2010, the chairman, John Lyons, he's an attorney in Portsmouth, he did say this is being rammed down our throats, and he did object unconstitutional and all sorts, but 4-1, he lost. We don't revisit it. This is wrong. You have the right to be upset. You have the right to tell all of your elected representatives to do something about it now. If you don't, you're just a doormat. When your child gets the test, you have the right to just say, I refuse. They say you don't have it because there's something called exemptions. And you don't qualify because you're not dead, half dead, or nobody in your family has a funeral or something enormous that you couldn't comply with. But they do tabulate the refuseniks, the parents that refuse. They go on vacation, they refuse to bring the kid in. Become one of them. We also have a law that says you can opt out of objectionable materials. These assessments are materials. They are objectionable. And what's more, we have the right to review and inspect them, and they won't release them. Nobody can release them.
They're copyrighted.
They're copyrighted and they're owned by a private organization. This isn't government anymore. This is Banana Republic stuff. Okay. So, Smarter Balance. Let's get to on their website, they also say that it recognizes that college readiness encompasses a wide range of knowledge, skills, and dispositions. What are dispositions? And only some of which will be measured on the Smarter Balance assessment. Objectively scored. Our assessments, that's the third criteria. They have to be valid, they're not. They have to be appropriate. Well, my Nashua teachers, you just heard the list, they are not cognitively appropriate. And they have to be objectively scored. But they can't be because they include dispositions. Dispositions measure the student's values, attitudes, and beliefs. Now, what you believe and what you believe, where's the objectivity to that? So these are completely invalid. Nashua School Board, the second biggest school district in the state, they wanted this, the teachers union came out and backed up the principal and these teachers when they came out with this statement, wrote to the commissioner or the Board of Education and said, we really don't like this. Our school board wanted to do that. We got a legal brief and they said, oh, we're trapped, we've got to do this, even though we know it's inappropriate. So they feel that they have to. Encourage them, they don't have to. Power rests in the school board. Did you know in the 1850s, every school district in this state, that we were operating under a district system that they had up and down the East Coast, all the states had it. If you didn't like your district, you could change in April, just like they used to change the parish, because they used to tithe through your taxes for the parishes. So it was the same system. They broke off the churches, but you still did it with the schools. You could go to your clerk and you say, I want to change my district from this one to this one. You didn't like any districts, 10 of you could get together and form your own new district. We had 2,600 districts in New Hampshire, average of 30 students per district. My district alone has 12,000. I think Deb's has 17,000. This is wrong. There's 175 districts. We could fix that. There are things that we can do. We don't have to be doormats. I'm running for state senate. I think I'm crazy, but it has to be done. I'm going to bring this issue to the front, whether I win or lose. My main argument is my opponent hasn't protected the teachers that are now being evaluated on these tests that we can't see. They could be fired based on tests that we can't see. Our students aren't being protected. Their data is being mined. Oh, they sell your data to all these providers. If they want to do a study, they want to develop another test, they want to develop a better textbook, they can get this information. They just buy it. Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Ed, Secretary of Education, was going to California. With the district he was going to, they needed some money to build a podium. They sold some data. They got the podium. Do you understand? They don't care. Oh, it's all about the children. Nice, nice. It's not. It's all about empowering you to understand that you run your government. This is self-government. These school districts had all the power. If you go back and look at the original constitutional language for Article 6, Part 1, it gave us the exclusive right to hire our teachers and contract with them for their support and maintenance. In 68, they got rid of that word exclusive when they were taking obsolete sectarian language out. Never explained to the people why it disappeared. It kind of just did with 157 words. But the point is, that's where local control comes from. We still have the right to hire our own teachers, but they took that word exclusive out so it wouldn't go to our heads. It's in there. It's gone to my head. These are our school districts. We have the power. My district could have said no. They could have said these aren't valid, appropriate, or objectively scored. They could have done a lot of things, but they need you to back them up. When I run for state senate, I've got to convince my people in Nashua that they want me to bring that to the state legislature. So there's going to be more people that help. So it's all about the people either being doormats or pushing back. After 20 years, we fixed the home education law. We're 2 years into this fight. We can do it. It just depends on which side you're going to be overwhelmed or you're going to say, okay, roll up my sleeves, we're going to do this. Jean? Let's go.
As in the introduction, I was mentioned as a state rep for Alton, and I was until a few weeks ago when I did move. So I just, to divulge properly, I'm now living in Hooksett and am no longer a current member of the United States, of the New Hampshire State Legislature, but will be running for the state senate in the upcoming election of the Hooksett area, District 16. Why have I done this is the story. There's been so much information put out here today, and it's all great information, so I don't want to repeat what you've already heard. The big reason that I got involved in politics was because I was starting to see in Alton, in my little community that my husband and I lived in about 14 years, that local control was being eroded away. It was disappearing in many different aspects. And certainly the education one for me was of vital concern. My husband and I are both teachers. He's a public sector teacher. I teach in the private sector. And when we started to see in Alton, all of a sudden I woke up in 2011 to find out that Alton had signed on to this Common Core, that when I went out and talked to my friends and people in the community, I talked to my representatives for the House, nobody could tell me anything about really in depth of what Common Core was. It was just, you know, the New Hampshire DOE put out new standards. I mean, it was misinformation and almost no information. So as we started to dig into this, and we started to go to meetings at the New Hampshire Department of Education and other meetings, it started to become really clear that there was a formation, that there was an implementation of education in the country and in New Hampshire from the top down. Because there is a law, there are laws on the books that say that you cannot centralize education in the United States. They had to be cagey about how they do it, so the Race for the Top funds came in. Actually, it was Obama's first stimulus bill that funded the larger part of the Race to the Top funding. We all paid for that. We didn't know it was in there at the time, but we do know now. And this funding, as it was coming down and trickling down into our communities, all these little communities signed on to Common Core, many of them in 2010, not understanding or even knowing what it was about. Those public hearings that Doris told you about at the beginning, when supposedly the DOE had these hearings, nobody was supposed to go to those hearings. Because they really believe there's an entrenched ideology in our New Hampshire DOE and many across our country. They're certainly not alone. That they know how to educate your children, my children. And they firmly believe that, and they have doubled down with Common Core in this state and in other states. And if you've been reading, you're seeing that Common Core is now, governors are starting to say, hey, we don't like this so much, and they're voting out Common Core. And we have to say good for them, because this is difficult, and you know what, it's difficult for the folks and the parents and the teachers that are now involved in this, because you can feel the resistance when you start to speak out. So in Alton, I ran 2011, we got in 2012, that election, and I started to go to all my school board meetings, and I started to ask questions. And we have a great school board in Alton. They're caring people. You probably have school boards that are caring people, but they didn't have any information on Common Core. The principal did. The principal and the superintendent understood, but the actual people on our school board did not know in Alton. And when Common Core came up for the vote, it was 5-0. Alton had Common Core, and nobody even knew what hit it. So when we started to say, well, what can we do about that as a community? We got together a group of people, and it was small, right? Sometimes it doesn't take a large number, you know. It just takes a dedicated small number. And we said, let's go and let's ask our school board about this. We went to 3 meetings. I went to 3 meetings where we had really, you know, sometimes passionate dialogue. But our goal was to put questions forth to the school board when they saw that they could not answer the questions, that they did not have information to answer the questions. They went back to the administration, who then were fumbling the answers of those questions. And it became apparent to the school board that something was wrong. Okay? That's what you can do. That's what you can do, is you go to your school boards, you find out who those people are, you talk to them, and you ask them questions. Question 1, how much is this going to cost my community to implement this in our community? And they can't tell you. The DOE has been asked this. New Hampshire Department of Education has been asked this at meetings that I've been in and public hearings. They have no answer. That is outrageous. We fund the government. You and I that pay our taxes pay for this. That they would implement something that they cannot look you in the eye and tell you how much it's going to cost. You should be outraged at them. They are accountable to us, not the other way around. Ask that question. See if you can get an answer. I guarantee that one will not be forthcoming. Your second question would be, well, who validated the standards? We've asked major experts from national arenas, and no one can tell us who vetted these wonderful standards that they espouse in Common Core here in New Hampshire. That's a fact. I can attest to that, because I asked 2 questions of a gentleman named Mark Tucker. And this was a big to-do at the legislative hearing about Common Core, and from the very first, when he came in and spoke, it was just a bunch of irritable, Tea Party people that just didn't like government. That's how he started. He actually started in the first paragraph talking about Tea Party. What has this got to do with Tea Party? This is about parents and accountable government, and having our children taught as individuals, not as some uniformity, this idea that we can all be the same. That's crazy. It's against our human nature. We are all different, and that's a good thing. That is not something that we need to fix. Okay? Ask them who validated the standards. Privacy issues. This one most school boards know nothing about. Sometimes I've sat in school board meetings, not in my own community because I've been traveling an awful lot, talking an awful lot about this and other local control issues. They don't even know what a data point is sometimes. 400, and that's just the beginning. Why are they collecting that data? That's none of their business. Their job is to educate our children to the very best of their ability. And what your political persuasion is, or what your beliefs are, have nothing to do with it. Ask them if they're comfortable with that. If they have children in the system, do you like the fact that your child now has 400 data points put into their little, what do they call that? There's a word for it. They all have like a little file with their information in there, right? Are they comfortable with that? Ask parents, do you like the fact that you have no control? You see, they don't want you to know that you have the control. You have it all. That's because you have a republic, not a democracy. And your republic tells you the rule of law. The rule of law from the federal all the way down to the smallest little community is how our republic works. That means that your local control has all the power. And they will not, and believe me, we've had this discussion with all of the officials in the New Hampshire DOE. They don't want to empower that with you. But that's a fact. You will be told that you have no choice. I was told that at the beginning. I didn't accept it. And I'm still not going to accept it because you know what? We pay those people in the DOE. We pay them. They are accountable to us. We are not accountable to them. Lastly, the teachers. The teachers. I mean, you talk about being between a rock and a hard place. I feel for the teachers that have to implement the English this year and the math. Because what are they supposed to do? At the beginning, the teachers were brought in very third place, right? I mean, your superintendent probably had the skinny pretty well, and your principal might have had the skinny. But the teachers really, okay, this was sort of thrust upon them, and they were asked probably to make, they were told all the same propaganda. So now they have actually tied evaluation to teaching on a test. How fair is that to these teachers? It's just ethically unfair. Don't forget your biggest ace in the hole if you decide to go out there and be an activist, because you can and you should, is that no child is the same as someone else. Every person in this room, every one of our children, our grandchildren, every one of our neighbors' friends' children are individuals. And they should be allowed to learn as an individual. We owe that to our children in our educational system. This does not service that. This is all about power. And it's about indoctrination with questionable material. That at the very least, if you don't want to go to the indoctrination portion, at the very least what your children are learning, you should have input on. You should know before they take the test. The fact that we cannot see this stuff. Do you know that they actually say on the bottom of tests you cannot photograph? I've given some of these tests in schools. You can't photograph anything. They're confidential. Confidential against who? Serious? Wow. So I would say to you, you should actually feel empowered here, because you know what? There have been people like these two ladies here that have been doing this work for 2 years. I'm fairly new to this, right? I got onto the scene late, implemented in Alton. Before, I didn't know what the heck was going on. I go, okay, that's fine, right? But you have a wealth of information. I want to let you know what happened in Alton. By the way, we did change the election of the school board to put my husband on that school board. And we went forth with trying to vote out Common Core, and Alton did it. We changed 5-0 to 3-2, and Common Core was voted out of Alton. They're now trying to figure out the standard and the testing issues. And every community is going to have to do that. But why not? Do it. Get it done. Don't hesitate, because you know what? It's better that you control and make maybe some mistakes, but you have the control to fix those mistakes, rather than to have that thrust upon you with absolutely no input whatsoever. So there is a good sign to this too, even though you're feeling overwhelmed probably and thinking, oh my Lord, you know, our children are the most important thing. And I know, isn't that a byline that you're just sick of hearing? Because I know I am. It's all for the children. But in reality, our children are the next generation. If we fail them so utterly, because we are reticent to push back against a government that is trying to overtake our educational system, then I say shame on us. And our children will be left to deal with the result of what we did as inactive participants in our own system. We can all go out there and do this and challenge and win. Don't let anybody say that we can't.
Do we have questions? You want to stand up and?
Can I just throw one thing out there? In Massachusetts, where they develop the best standards in the country, they use their own test. It's called the MCAS, and they would post the test questions after they would give it every year, so you could see it. Good luck with the Smarter Balance.
Question, where do we get the individual items that comprise the 400 data points?
The U.S. Department of Education's website. It's not like they hide it.
You
They have
can,
them listed?
you
Yes.
can Google it. Just start putting 400 data points, P20 longitudinal database. It will come up because there's a lot of moms posting things about it. You may create an
So
article
listed
about
on
it.
actual 400
Absolutely.
items, that's-
Yes, I've looked at that.
Yeah.
they're cataloged.
Sooner or later, you'll get a link directly to the USDO.
If you can't find it, I will send you a link. Contact me. Anybody else?
Anybody else?
I actually have a ton of questions. But first I want to thank all three of you for all of the information you've provided and your passion in changing what we've been dealt with. I just want to clarify, when this was all implemented, it never went through the legislature.
No.
It was all Department of Education.
Yes.
So there
All
really
50
was
states.
no clear directive toward us as citizens that this was happening.
Not on
Nothing.
the federal level and not on the state level. No Child Left Behind, remember, that went through the federal level. So this is about
Nothing.
no.
Maybe SB 48, is she asking that?
When we got the waiver, there were a couple pieces of legislation, and right before they passed them, Senate Bill 48, they had a committee of conference where they came in from the Department of Education and told the Senator Stiles, we need to do this, we need to change this language in order to get our waiver. They're writing our state legislation. So now we're gonna get an extension to the waiver. They'll try to do that again. We need to push back.
Yeah, but to clarify that, SB 48 wasn't about adopting standards. SB 48 was changing the terminology. Under No Child Left Behind, if your school was failing or you weren't meeting adequately your yearly progress, they pretty much kind of categorized it as a failure. Under SB 48, they now categorize it as a priority or focused school. And when they do that, they can then, she talked about the regional liaisons, they can come in and remediate your school. So that doesn't really particularly apply to the standards, but what Doris is trying to tell you is we were literally sitting in the room with the legislators and with SB 48 when this was being hammered out between the senators and the representatives, because what had happened, it didn't pass, but there were some technicalities with the language. So they come together in a committee, a conference, and they work out that language. And Senator Stiles, who is a senator out here, walked into the room and literally said, I mean, I almost fell out of my chair, said, if we pass this, the federal government will give us our waiver.
Money.
Literally holding legislation in this state hostage for a waiver from No Child Left Behind that Senator Rubio says is illegal.
$70
So
million.
we're now passing legislation to align with everything the federal government wants. We're now, where is that coming from us? We're doing things, we're literally passing legislation, reforming our schools, not based on what all of you have said, come to the legislature and said, we're having a problem in our school, we need to fix this. This is what the federal government's telling our state legislators. If we do this, we can get this. So we're accountable to the federal government. They're not accountable any longer to you. So make no mistake, that eroded your local control right there. Right there.
Look at
Voting matters.
Look at Manchester, they have 7 priority schools, and they're in the process of remediation, so they had to do an innovation plan. And on the innovation plan, there's 5 or 6 or 8 pages, and they talk who has the primary responsibility for each of the line items. A half of them was the Department of Education. So once you fail, there's a remediation process, and oh, don't worry, they got $666,000 for this remediation process. But it takes it away from the locals. Everything is top down, because if you don't perform, they have a plan for you. And ultimately, if you fail, like in Newark and Detroit and some of these schools, they close your school and they turn it into a charter. And we all know that charters are great because we have a few of them, we have 22 of them, and they're pretty good individual, unique schools that try to service a niche. But these charters aren't. What they essentially do is eliminate your school board.
Right.
That is the goal.
Take it
If
over.
they flip them all into charters, you no longer have a school board. That is the ultimate goal over the next 10 years.
And we're seeing it. New Orleans, I think, pretty much all of their, they flipped them all to charters now. So that way you no longer have control. The charters in the state are accountable to the State Board of Education. I don't want to get into an anti-charter rant, because I do see some of them serving their students very well. But I think it's important to understand how this is all working. And Doris brought it up earlier about this workforce training, and it's something that I kind of skipped over. A lot of what we're talking about, we're calling it Common Core, and you're hearing Common Core, and technically some of it is not aligned to or responsible by the Common Core standards, but it's now been given that label. The data collection is really something separate from Common Core. What I try to tell people, and I want to be very clear about this is a redesigning of public education in America, and President Obama stated that in a State of the Union address. You go Google State of the Union address, Obama, redesign public education, you will hear him say that. Okay, he's redesigning public education from the federal government. And where is that coming from? Jane brought up Mark Tucker. If you Google his name, M-A-R-C, Tucker, and you read his letter to Hillary Clinton, because when the Clintons were in office, this is when they tried it, okay? kind of bottomed out, because at that time the Republicans said no. Republicans have jumped in on this. The Republican governors mistakenly just all jumped in on this under the Obama administration. But the redesigning is into workforce development. Now, do you think Phillips Exeter's concerned about workforce development, or do you think they're concerned about educating the child? This is a transformation from a liberal arts education where your child gets to be educated to the best of their ability, and then they get to choose their path in life, to now a workforce development. And you can see it, if you're familiar with what's going on in the European countries, you'll find this like in Germany, for instance. And so this is about workforce training. And workforce training really doesn't involve the highest level of education for your kids. I mean, they need to fill jobs.
It's a lot of surveys, behavioral surveys and tracking from kindergarten, third grade, or
we're
whatever.
not saying that jobs are not important, because I have kids. I want them to be productive citizens. But you know, if my daughter decides someday to, she's in nursing school right now, decides to stay home and take care of her kids, or my son does that, I want them educated. So
Round.
when they go sign for a house, they understand what interest means and how to calculate it, or be able to read the documents and understand. There's more to education than workforce training. And this is a system of tracking your kids either to the workforce or to college. And I had a gentleman from the Netherlands say that this is what they did in the Netherlands when he was a kid, and he was blessed because he got put on that college track.
Yeah.
Your kid's gonna be blessed, I don't know. I don't know if they'll be blessed enough that the schools, and the workforce developers out there, and they're in New Hampshire and they're in
You'll
the
see
country.
also-
Are they going to put them on that path? I don't know.
The
But
public-
that's the point of
The
this.
public-private partnerships that they're developing in Manchester and elsewhere, you've got companies coming in and they want cheap labor. So they're gonna get internships at these companies, they're gonna train them for their job. But meanwhile, they get free or very cheap labor, and then when they come out, they can give them starter jobs. Again, cheap labor. That is the goal. Your kids aren't being educated for four-year colleges, at best two-year colleges.
They've admitted that.
Where the private schools that don't use the Common Core, they're gonna be tracking for the 4 years. So they're gonna be the leaders, and then these are the workforce. And that's not the way public education was designed.
Can you say a little bit about how that tracking happens from the workforce training to the college prep?
Well,
Kindergarten.
It's like Europe, where you're gonna decide whether or not your kids they're gonna decide whether they're good enough to go this way or that way,
But
based on their assessment.
They keep all the information on each child.
They're gonna survey, we're already hearing from parents who are being surveyed. There is a law in Texas right now that was just passed that said kids in 8th grade have to pick a career path.
Yeah.
They have to pick, now I will tell you this, my daughter decided in her junior year to go to nursing school. Shocked the heck out of us, because I'm not one of those medical people, but she chose it as her junior year. She had no intention of going to the medical field until she became a junior in high school.
Not 8th
They're
grade.
told in Texas, this is workforce training. So the survey is gonna kind of give them feedback. There was a parent in Nashua that her son took the.
Yeah, it's the son of an attorney and a teacher, and I think they told him he was gonna be a rapper.
So they're surveying kids to kind
A
of put
rapper.
them
A rapper.
on this track. That's
Like
the
music
ultimate
rap.
goal. That's the ultimate goal, is to start
Parents would
tracking
live
these kids and telling them where they fit
And
into.
convincing them, making so they believe that they're not going up here, that they need to go there.
So there's no choices.
They're limited. They're trying to limit the choice where they feel you would best support the cog of the wheel of industry and.
If we have a lot of machinery jobs, we need you
Sure.
in there.
But what happens when those jobs become obsolete?
The government shouldn't be here for managing
You
our
can-
whole economy.
You can transfer to a different career if you're well educated. You might need some additional training, but if you are well educated and your job becomes obsolete, there is an advantage to being a well educated person. But if you've been on this track for this menial job, or whatever job, maybe it's a good job at the time, but it becomes obsolete. Do you want your 27, 28, 35-year-old to be well educated so they can make that transition, or going through a dumbed down system that put them, on this track to this job?
Right, not have the right skills.
Could you advise as to, if you, as a parent, want your child to opt out of any of this standardized testing, any of this survey taking, what is the most complete and surefire way to do that? Is there a blanket form that can be created that you say, I don't want my child to, because sometimes you don't even find out till the day before.
That's right.
Oh, we're taking such and such testing tomorrow,
Do it
what?
in writing and talk to your child and make sure
Yes, that they're
if there's
telling you.
any assessment that the child asks the teacher, I need to call home, because they'll try to railroad your child anyway.
But can you say at the beginning of the school year, can you fill out a form, get it notarized, whatever you have to do to say,
You
I
can. I
do
mean,
not want my child,
Yeah,
I'm
there's
opting
a
out
national-
of
There are forms, but
There are forms.
essentially, if you make it very clear on a piece of paper in writing and you sign it, and you go in and talk to the principal and you just say, I'm gonna hold you accountable to this, this is what I want, please respect my wishes. He should not need a form to understand plain English.
but I'd stay on top of that, because
You're gonna have to follow up to make sure they don't
let
mislead
your
the
kids
kid.
know.
Right.
Because there's been times where the parents have done that and their kids have still.
They push the child.
Yeah.
And then they go
Bully.
back and say, well, they
Tim,
wanted
bully.
to take the test, or, they didn't tell us everything, You have to have your child working with you to opt out.
But from what you're saying, it sounds like there would be some teachers out there who, like you said, have gotten pushed into this a little bit, who might say, understand and say, I got it, okay, you know, Joey's not taking the test today.
There are teachers that, you know what, I have, and more, I don't know about you guys, but everywhere I go afterward, teachers will speak, or I get emails, and they speak, but almost all of them say that they're afraid to speak out at the school.
For
That's
their
a
jobs,
terrible,
because-
yeah,
because of
terrible
their
position that puts them in. I feel for them, I really do.
But also tell your teachers, tell the principal, tell each individual teacher, and then talk to your child to make sure that they have it. And if they do, force the child or bully the child, go to your school board and complain.
Yes.
And tell them your child was intimidated, or everybody got cookies except my child, or they made them stand out in the hall like they did in
And these things have
Manchester.
happened.
Yes,
These
they
things
do.
have happened.
And if
So-
your school board is not supportive of you, because don't forget, if school boards have been doing their thing for how many years without anybody checking in, right? It's only natural that they'll kind of push back, you know, well, the principal says it's fine. That's our job to now tell the school board, you know what, elections are coming. Elections have results. And if you get on that school board, or if your friend or your husband or whatever gets on that school board, guess what? Things are gonna change.
You can also make a policy, you can also work ahead
Yes.
of time and say,
Massachusetts
I
schools
want
have done
you
that.
to get a policy
Yes.
so that my child's not bullied, and make them put it down
In writing.
in writing
That's
in
gonna
the
be
school
tough,
district.
that's gonna be a tough challenge, because they're not gonna wanna give you that right to opt out or anything.
No.
Some of
Start
the
the
schools in
conversation.
Massachusetts have started doing that, because they're not happy about this, you know, I mean, think about it. Massachusetts has some of the best standards in the country. People say, why did they lower their I asked the Secretary of
They're
Education.
reconsidering it.
He came to Manchester a couple years ago. I ran into the Secretary of Education. I went to his school and asked him, how do you reconcile these states that lowered their standards for Common Core? He had no answer for me. I mean, he basically said, yeah, that's basically
But
what they
is
did.
there somebody from a legal standpoint, is there an attorney who's well-versed in all this, who could
You
write up
shouldn't
some
need an
kind of?
attorney, you shouldn't need
No,
to
there-
ask them.
You just tell them it's your U.S. constitutional right. The Supreme Court validated it.
Sid would,
You
yeah,
can
Sid's a
choose your
former-
education for your,
Former administrator.
There
Yeah.
is a form, and you can go into school, and the school has to have it. And you can go in and ask your principal for it, fill it out, put
What
it in
form
your.
is
I don't
it?
think so.
What is it called?
They have to have the form.
What's
It's
the
an
They
opt-
don't
it's
make
called an
one.
opt-out form.
They're not gonna make one. They've got so much pressure from
They will
Virginia Berry. They are
discourage
not
you
making a
doing
form.
it, But but they have to offer you the form. So
I'm just
you have
thinking,
to
is there
ask.
just power in numbers, if everybody came in with the same form and
That's right.
said, "Here's my
Exactly,
form,
and it's
here's my
happening,
form,
it's
here's my
happening in
form."
New York, that the parents
It's
are up
already
in arms in New York, they're a year ahead of us, the
What's
teachers
wrong
are
with
up in
that?
arms.
It's an
Teachers who
opt-out
thought this was a
form.
great
The
idea,
opt-out is for
when the testing
exceptional
started, now they're up in
circumstances.
arms about it,
You would
and the
opt out
parents
of
are
the
saying,
exam.
no way are our
You
kids
write a
taking,
letter,
I
too.
would
I
never
put that
want
on
my
my
kids
Facebook
for the
page.
test, my kids aren't in
There's
public
an
school, but,
opt-out.
yeah, sorry, he said,
Sorry, I hate to disagree, but the solution is not to put a Band-Aid on. The solution is to remove Common Core, to go en masse to the school boards
yes.
and demand that they do something. Just getting a form to put a Band-Aid on your kid for a test is not the solution. We need to remove this because it's cancerous.
It's
happening
cancerous, yeah.
in schools, it's happening in your town level with the Granite State Futures foolishness.
That's right.
Towns have signed on to. It's the same MO, it's a different name, Common Core,
It's
Granite
true.
State Futures.
You know, sir, you're absolutely right, but don't forget now, when those opt-out forms start to show up, and that school board starts to see that that community is awake, and they're not liking this, maybe the school board is going to now work with the parents to get this out. So, you know, you're absolutely right, your school boards and your legislators, right? Your legislators, your public servants, right? You tell them that you want that out. You have the power, and if that's a tool, and certainly I'm gonna use it with my child. My child's in public school, I don't have money to put my child in a private school, and I can't homeschool. We'd have problems if I tried to homeschool. But I'm gonna use that, right, and that's a tool to go toward the goal, which is to get rid of it.
Use all the approaches.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if the people who weren't able to attend this meeting, will this be shown on YouTube, and how would they watch it?
Oh.
I mean, what's this?
Best I can do.
Deb, she posted, where do you post your videos?
Education matters.
If you go to the YouTube channel is called Human Energy Concepts. Happens to be my husband's. And But if you just put that in the YouTube box, it doesn't come up. So, but if you go to find it, you have to find at least one of my videos, and then it says published by, and it says the YouTube channel, Human Energy Concepts. If you click on Human Energy Concepts on any one of those videos, you will get every single video that I've put up here. If you, like, I've done all the New Hampshire State Education Committee videos.
Can't you just type in
just in Google,
Education Matters?
Education Matters, some people don't get it. There's so many other ones. There's Education Matters, you can try Education Matters TV show on Facebook, if it comes up for you. But then, if you go
This is going to
to,
be on YouTube, not Facebook.
if you go to
Right.
Both places. You can find it.
YouTube
But
and
you're
put
gonna
in
watch
New
it on
Hampshire State
YouTube.
Education Committee, New Hampshire State Education Committee, I must have 30 videos up there, and you will,
You know what, get her email address when you leave.
There you go.
and I could send you, let you know the link when it gets up. It might take a day or two.
I've known Brentwood for been here about a year and a half, and I must say, it is disappointing that they're, we went to see the kindergarten, our 5-year-old daughter, 3-year-old son, and then the third one on the way. And they were really pushing Common Core, and there is no history on Common Core, so it's kind of like a different
Experiment.
project than our children. The way I think of it, because the teachers are being taught to the tests, they have no creativity and know how to teach. So here in Brentwood, I pay a lot of taxes for schools. So why should we pay all these taxes if everyone's just going to follow suit? If here matches, a town that doesn't pay any taxes for their school system, I think we should penalize them for their
I think you
tax
should
money.
join the school board.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a group here, you guys, if you have some ladies who have organized this meeting, I would say contact them. There's a Stop Common Core New Hampshire, stopcommoncorenh.org, there's that website, we post to that all the time. Stop Common Core New Hampshire on Facebook, we're available, but it really has to be your community, you guys have to get together. I mean, that's what they did in Manchester. Manchester, we just started showing up at the meetings.
Every school board meeting.
And we killed it, I mean.
Every public comment period, you show up and you say something.
That, my wife, she's homeschooling now because of this.
Great.
Great.
I mean,
My
you
wife
shouldn't,
actually attended this, I think in Manchester, when you guys did it in Manchester.
That's good, and I always say do what's best for your kids, but the SATs are being aligned to Common Core,
Right.
so,
Even private schools.
Yeah, and when I talk about, when I was talking about the math, they're coming up with new language in math, and so if your kids have never seen this language before, and then they sit down to take these SATs, it might not be because they don't know math, they may be brilliant, but now they sit down to take these SATs or ACTs, and they're going, I don't even know what this term means. So it's very, like I said, the tentacles of this octopus is trying to get you as a homeschooler to conform, because we're going to threaten you when your kid gets to that SAT. Now, I say give your kid the best education possible, because guess what? Lots of colleges aren't going to look at SATs
anymore.
They know what's going on. Good colleges are going to say, the homeschooler was well educated, and maybe they're not passing this politically motivated test, this SAT, but they're gonna look past that. I mean, I've had
It
college
depends.
admission people tell me, but that's how they want to get you to conform.
But the pressure may be for college that you don't get federal funds unless the school goes by these Common Core SATs and picks the politically correct students. There's gonna be some give and take back here, that it's gonna get worse and worse. Take them out and just homeschool them, but get back in and fight it so that you kill the problem at its roots.
Yeah, my kids aren't subjected to this. They have never been. They've never been in a public school. I've always put them in Catholic schools, and I have fought for academic excellence and literacy and parental rights since my son, who's 22, entered kindergarten in the public schools, because I saw what was going on in the public schools. The people who fight for education, they were the people who said, just fund our school, fund our school. It seemed like, what are you funding? Shouldn't you look at what you're spending your money on? I was more interested in what was coming into the classroom. So, bravo to you for doing what's best for your kids, but again, you mentioned the taxes you're paying for this.
We actually reached out and asked them why they're pushing Common Core.
Yeah.
They're there isn't, to change our standards. And just, it's just
Yeah, we
standards.
better-
You need more pushback,
Yep.
but you're on the right track.
You guys keep talking about Massachusetts and how they lowered our standard. Well, what did New Hampshire do? How much lower did we go, or do?
Okay, all right.
We had the GLEs.
Well, yeah, okay, I'll try to make this quick. Okay, so Massachusetts, under Governor Weld, that's when they got together, and it was bipartisan, wrote the standards. Sandra Stotsky, who sat on the validation committee, was actually in charge of that. Great colleges, she brought in Harvard professors and teachers, it was all transparent, so that's what they did. In New Hampshire, so you're questioning what we had before, right?
Correct.
Okay, so New Hampshire standards, we had, again, in math, English, science, and social studies. I think the best gauge would be to look at the Fordham Institute, how they had ranked our standards prior to Common Core. And I know some of the people who were involved in ranking, and the English standards were okay, and I think Stotsky would probably say that we had better standards than Common Core. The math standards were pretty bad. And this, again, these were developed under Governor Lynch. Now, so I just want to be clear that this was prior to Governor Hassett. So these were developed under Governor Lynch. So the math standards were pretty bad. When we were going through this, when this process was taking place, I knew that the math standards, and I think that some of the teachers were you'll hear them talk about, that at that time, that was difficult for them. If you read them, I read them, I couldn't understand them. I'm a person who tutors math, I couldn't even understand some of the standards. So they needed to be clarified, they needed to be improved. That's what you do at the state level, that's what you do as a governor. That's the responsibility of the governor. And instead of working to make them better, they punted and said, we're gonna accept. So the Common Core, would you say that the Common Core standards are better math to the old New Hampshire standards? I would ask you this. If you are feeding your children cake, cookies, ice cream, and candy every night for dinner, is that a healthy diet? No. If you take out the candy and you replace it with carrots, have you improved your dinner? Technically, yes. That's what you got. That's what you got. Technically, there may be an improvement. I understand that when I read them, they were a little clearer to me. I think that, yes, that there have been improvements made, but again, my whole position has been, if we're going to spend this money, if we're going to do all this, why are we still not asking for the best standards, and certainly ones that are developmentally appropriate, certainly ones that you can understand, certainly ones that a Harvard business degree individual should be able to understand.
But it's not just the standards, because even in math, there's propaganda. You may agree with the propaganda, but it's riddled throughout. So they shouldn't be using math as a tool to indoctrinate. So good or bad is irrelevant. We got to get rid of the nationalization so we can put our own ideas in our children,
And just
not
to back that up, the Union Leader, the Manchester Union Leader had a couple of reporters take the math assessment and take the English assessment, and one of the reporters literally started out his article on, he took the English, the sample questions. You can go to the website Smarter Balance. You can actually look at some of the sample questions, and he started off his article that how politically biased, I'm not sure if I'm getting that term right, you'll have to go look at that article, how politically motivated the questions were in the English. Now, what do you think is going to happen with science and social studies?
It's already in there. Science and social studies is already in math, is what I'm saying. Because they made sure they haven't lost a step. They're already in there. They're supposed to adopt the next generation science. They stopped using Common Core science, because that's bad. They took the title off, but throughout it's all Common Core. And they haven't adopted them. They promised in the waiver they'd do it this year, but the moms have been too vocal. So they're scared. So now they're just sort of putting them in, like Nancy Stiles district. They're already using it. You go to the district. It's already on the website, but the state didn't adopt it. So whatever they do, it's subterfuge, but it's there. You got to keep your eyes open, and you got to push back.
This gentleman in the back was really waiting a long time.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Everything I'm hearing here is systemic throughout New Hampshire and other areas, not just here. We're talking about a top to bottom government and not a bottom to the top government, which means everything originates through us.
Right.
And that is a problem. There are 2 board members from our local board here tonight. So, you know, I mean, they're at least hearing
Bravo, thank you for coming.
what's going on, yeah.
Just thank
That's
them
all
that
right,
they were.
Liz, they're just 2, okay.
Well, we have a co-op board member too.
A co-op board member?
Yep, that's wonderful.
Excellent, because we're having trouble getting in touch with the co-op.
I have a hard time getting emails for school board members. They're not on the websites, they're,
Oh, we are,
To me,
we're all
it
over
seems
the
like we're
place.
setting up kids to
They have
fail
our absolutely,
with the Common Core.
absolutely. And your
I have a
teachers?
child that's on the spectrum that has autism,
Oh,
and
that's really bad.
he's extremely intelligent,
Mhm.
but when you're explaining math and that he's gonna have to explain it,
Oh,
I
yes.
have a hard time with
he's gonna fail.
Yeah.
and he has to
Now,
take the
deep
test
down,
too.
he's tested higher than, any kid I know,
Right.
but he can't explain
That's
it.
why
That's
this
right.
doesn't work.
So I feel like we're failing him.
Special ed is particularly targeted and it's gonna
Terrible.
hit it, take it on the chin.
Right.
But even if it wasn't,
They have to be
they
tested too.
vote on what the percent the cut scores are. Everybody below fails, everybody above passes. It's not a matter of proficiency, they just want failure. It's built into the system.
30% are gonna
And
fail.
It's no longer, there's no longer, these assessments aren't academically motivated. These are behavioral, these,
You heard from the
it's all
national
terms
teachers.
of competencies. They're switching from the Carnegie unit, where it's academic achievement and such, they're competencies, and they're redesigning whatever the big competencies are. It's a whole new
It's,
world.
honestly, because as a math tutor, that scares the living daylights out of me, what you just said, because those are the kids that I'm most concerned about, is your special ed kids, because they have to take the test.
That's right.
And that's the other thing, the cut scores.
Painful.
We have got to watch where they place the cut scores, because guess what? In the past, they'll change them to make it look like more kids are more proficient this year. They've simply lowered the cut score. Okay?
I don't know what cut score means.
Okay,
Cut off
thank
the
you.
point that you
The
asked.
Right,
cutoff
so
point.
let's say they say if you get, 70% of the answers right, you're now considered proficient. Below 70%, you're not considered proficient. Well, there's pressure, there's political pressure now on these things. Better lower that cut score, so it looks like more kids are jumping over
Be
the
like
fence
60%.
the next year. So that's something we will definitely, nationally, we'll be watching that, because that's how it's happened before.
Good
It
luck
happened in
with
New
getting
York.
the info.
You can't
We'll
see
get
these
that
tests.
info, we'll get that.
These are online adaptive tests. Nashua spent $1 million for technology that we're gonna spend $1 million anyway, so it's no cost to us. But these are adaptive tests, like if you get 3 right, you get a harder question. 3 wrong, you get a lower question. But we'll never see them. So how do we know that they're even evaluating them correctly? It's a black box. This
There
is
was
like
legislation from Representative Cordelli to put the questions out after, we have to pass legislation, that's crazy. In Massachusetts, they made sure you saw those questions. When they developed those standards and they used their own test, one of the best, they made sure that it was transparent. It was all about working together. They called in the teachers in Massachusetts. They helped develop the standards. They used their higher education professors. So they put that in for, it wasn't this secretive thing. And that may sound like a conspiracy, but why are they not putting that information? Why do we have to pass legislation? Why are they not saying, calm down, parents, do not worry about this. Once we administer this test, you are going to have access to every piece of information that was required.
Why do we
of your
even have to
students.
wait for after? I don't understand that. I
Well,
mean, why can't we
for
get it
security
before?
purposes.
What security?
If they're taking a test, they can't give you that information. It's going to be on a test. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it doesn't have to be the exact same question.
Just refuse.
Yeah.
But that's why.
You
No, so I can myself look at it also as not just as a parent, but as a taxpayer. So we're setting up these kids for failure.
Yes.
And my son with the autism, and even kids that don't have it.
Right.
So going forward, we're basically adding to our pockets how much we're paying, because we're gonna have to pay more for special ed.
Yes.
remediation.
Because we are basically putting these kids under even more stress.
Right.
That's why it doesn't work.
So we're asking for more money to.
And that's not even,
that.
I just saw an article 2 days ago on some international site or something that was talking about the fact that now the Gates, Microsoft, after they've sold all of this, software nationally for this programs and for the computers is going to actually mandate that the schools that have already spent the millions of dollars to buy all this stuff can no longer use, is it 8? Windows 8, they're gonna cut that off, and then guess what? After your communities have now bought the stuff, it's obsolete, and you're gonna pay again, because we're going to have to buy the new stuff to keep the assessments going. And that was 2 days ago that I saw that, and it was astronomical, the amount that it was gonna cost communities to do it. So it's just a gift that keeps on giving. Or taking.
I'm gonna ask, I think there really needs to be a separation between the testing and the standards themselves. Testing is another issue. The Obama administration coming in with Race to the Top and holding the standards hostage. Those are separate issues. I'm a math teacher. I've been working with these standards since the drafts came out.
What grade?
I 5th through 8th, and I teach honors algebra, and I tutor for high school students. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
And you could maybe answer it for me, because I've wondered about this. As a teacher, it might be easier maybe for math, but as a teacher, if you are assessing to very specific questions that are on that assessment, isn't that your standards? They aren't separate, because you can't teach except to get that test passed, right? So they're not calling the assessment standards, but isn't that actually the standards?
It drives the curriculum.
Even before these standards, I taught to the GLE standards, and there is a crosswalk on the state DOE website, so you can see the crosswalk between the NECAP standards.
Yep, that's true.
But you weren't evaluated on the GLEs. You will be evaluated on the Smarter
And
Balance.
that's why I'm saying that that's a whole different issue, and you can't assess one teacher on one thing because that child is an effect. And one of the things with Massachusetts held the students accountable, and they were not allowed to pass on to the next grade if they did not meet proficiency in their standards. In New Hampshire, everybody passes along, so the kids who didn't get it all of a sudden are getting further and further and further behind. So I think the whole education system at some points need to be looked at.
Wouldn't it be nice to have your voice up there?
But I have to say, I'm fortunate. I work in a school district. I've worked in 2 different school districts where I have had complete freedom of
That's great.
how I develop my curriculum.
Good.
I know my standards are there. I know the standards are the minimum. I can exceed. I have
So you
taught,
choose your own textbooks?
I could create most of my own
Isn't it only
material.
15%?
But do you choose your own textbooks in your school?
The teachers voted on the textbooks that they want to use. Yes.
So all the teachers voted on
The
the textbooks?
teachers have the say.
Okay.
Is it Common Core aligned?
The new ones are, but that's not the only thing we use. Textbooks are a tool.
Yeah.
What other tools are out there?
Yeah.
That's good. You have this much freedom now. Hopefully that won't go away.
Right. That's what we're seeing in
It's
other
going away.
states is because, and keep in mind, the waivers that have been pulled back from the Secretary of Education have been pulled back because they're not going after the teachers as much. It's a way to get you to comply. It really, it went from, one school board member said that it was an attack on schools under No Child Left Behind, and this is an attack on teachers. Now, you may not see it.
Well, teachers have been attacked in the media and every
Yeah.
place
Yeah, but they
else.
shouldn't be.
But the point is that to get you to comply with Common Core, if you don't like it, or you don't like the standard, how are we gonna get you to comply? Simple, we tie you to your evaluation to that test. And so, I love the fact that you're saying that you have some freedom. And I think that the New York teachers thought that they'd have some freedom
Yeah, but they
too,
don't.
until the testing began. And then that's where the crunching begins. That's where it starts to start coming into your classroom. And now your kids are not progressing, and you're not an effective
ineffective.
teacher anymore.
But
And
that's
so,
where, we have to stop. You have to find another way to get kids, that you cannot move kids on in math.
yes.
Until they have become proficient.
How about a policy in your district that says you will not be tied to the test?
I have to be evaluated somehow.
I agree.
And the testing should not.
There's other ways.
I agree. You should be evaluated.
Some sort of
But
track
how
record
about
that is
not to
looked
the
at.
test? How
Not
about
to the
not to
test.
the test?
You can't go on any one thing. It has
That's
to
right,
be
but
on
it
many
wants to,
things.
is what she's saying.
When does the testing begin in New Hampshire?
Spring of 2015.
2015?
Yep.
In the spring.
I thought it was already held.
They've had piloting and
That's
they've had
pilot.
field testing.
Field testing.
So there's been a little bit of it and then a little bit more. In 2015, everybody gets it.
Right.
Yep. So, we'll take her first.
You had mentioned wanting to keep, the Common Core wanting to keep the lesson plans and worksheets all the same throughout the country. Does that mean that each classroom is supposedly going to be teaching the same thing?
Eventually.
And how would that affect her then?
Eventually.
Well, I think, when you have standards, and you have a test, it drives the curriculum. Now, they'll tell you that you get to choose your own curriculum, and that's true. But if you're being tested on something specific, what we found in the past, and this is under No Child Left Behind too, is that it drives your curriculum.
Right.
So what we do is, in my town of Bedford, is we hire a curriculum coordinator who looks at the test, and they try to go out and find the curriculum that most meets what's going to be tested. So I'll give you an example. A teacher that I know in one district, I'll keep her name and her information out of there. She called me several years ago, and she said, Anne Marie, I'm on this committee as a teacher, and I get to pick the math textbook. And I said, oh, that's great. She said, yeah, but they gave me 3 lousy ones to choose from. Because they felt that it aligned to the New Hampshire standards at the time. So yes, they get to pick their own curriculum, but that's what we see. Yes, you can pick whatever you want, but this is teaching to the test. This is No Child Left Behind on steroids, because this is going to drive it even more. That's the way it's developed. This is this reform. This is how it's developed to get you to comply to these standards. I don't want to
Doris, isn't it though that there's a 15%?
Yes, the state, when they adopt it, the state can add 15%.
Right, so you can add 15% of whatever you choose in the classroom.
They throw cursive back
On
in.
the state
They throw
level, in the
cursive
classroom,
back.
in the school level, you can do whatever you want. You can reject this, you can accept it, you can do whatever you want to it. On the state level, they can only add 15%.
That's
The
because
problem
we have
is,
local control. Some states are different, but New Hampshire, every district is a sovereign unit, and they can say no. But the problem is the
but
state's
you're gonna be tested, take the
assessments
test.
are supposed to coordinate
Right.
and align with what the curriculum that you choose, but it's an impossibility. So we need to straighten out that statute.
Yeah. Oh, there was a question in the back? What was that?
Thank you.
Oh, did you have a question? Oh, no, the lady behind you.
Melissa, you.
Did you have a question?
I just wanted to talk to you, because I can see how passionate you are. Just a couple of things I just wanted to throw out there that I personally have learned in the past year, that I want to make sure that people know. As far as the testing is concerned, absolutely right, yes, we teach to the test, because we want the students to do well on the test, we want them to succeed, and that is tied into our federal funding. So yes, it is important to us. We are an elementary school, one of 6 towns that feed into a middle and a high school, so we are together in this as far as Common Core is concerned. We do not tell the teachers how to teach though, as you stated, it's your curriculum. Just one simple example I want to share. We had a little girl that lived maybe 2 towns over, and she moved into our town when she was in the 4th grade. In the 4th grade, we focus on the state of New Hampshire, so they'll visit the State House, they'll do the walk and all of that. This little girl had done it in 3rd grade, just 2 towns over. So when she got here in 4th grade, it was a repeat for her. And it just seems to me like it's a classic example of why Common Core, in some ways, is very positive, because we are such a mobile society.
So you're saying in New Hampshire, she transferred? Okay, so New Hampshire had a set of standards. So if New Hampshire had one set of standards, then it didn't work.
Then the town didn't do it.
Then it
Okay.
didn't work.
But I just want to take it a step further. And I want to say, as far as the teachers are concerned, my understanding is that they're still in, first of all, we've piloted the Smarter Balance test 2 years in a row. But from what I've heard, it was very positive as far as, we do have a curriculum coordinator. We heard very positive feedback. Even from the students that took it, we had actually heard very positive feedback. I do hear what you're saying about the investment in the computers. Just so happens that in our particular town, we do have a lot of technology, so we're lucky in that aspect. But I feel that computers are the wave of the future anyway, so at some point we will have computerized testing. I just think that that's coming. As far as the teachers are concerned, my understanding is that we are looking for a way to evaluate them, but my understanding is it won't be based on 1 year of testing. We'll look at trends, and it may be 5% of their evaluation. It's not 80%, it's not 90%, because that obviously would not be fair. So I think we're doing our best to
Yeah,
take all of that
that's
into
good,
consideration. The other thing that I wanted to mention was as far as the nonfiction is concerned, because we have a board member that actually was quite concerned about that herself. And our understanding is that they're going to, at the high school level, for example, in the literature and the English classes, you'll still get the fiction and the classics.
Some, you don't get as much.
Some, but you can get your nonfiction in your history or your science classes. So they're trying to find ways to tie it in a positive way. And then the only other thing that I just wanted to say is, I know people are talking about having their children opt out of the testing. I'm not talking to you as a taxpayer or a board member right now. I'm talking to you as a mother of 4 young children. My 3rd grader took the test this year. Okay, actually I had a 5th grader that did too. I am not gonna say to my 8-year-old, I want you to fight my battle. I want you to sit in front of that test and watch that clock time out. Don't you take that test. I will not put my child in that position. I just don't think it's fair.
You shouldn't have to put your child, if you tell the teachers and you tell the administration, they should respect your, honor that. They don't have to sit them in front of the computer.
They should be in another room, reading a book, or coloring in a color
But I asked
book.
this particular, I'm a school board member as well, and I asked this particular question, can you opt your child out?
And the
of
answer is
Smart Amounts
no.
test? And I was told no by the superintendent.
And I
It the
was told
superintendent
that too.
But, so it's my understanding that the school district can't opt out, but the parent can opt
Can
the child
refuse.
out, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
It's called
and she's
refuse.
absolutely right, you're not gonna ask a 4th grader or a 5th grader
No.
to tell the teacher, you've gotta do it through a
Absolutely,
form,
yes,
or
absolutely.
going to the teachers at the beginning of the year, you're not gonna do it through your 4th
Right.
grader, because even being a school board member for several years now,
Yeah.
your children get, kind of accosted in school, shall we say.
Yeah.
So, I had a couple other questions though, so you know that you can opt out, I mean, you're.
It's not
you're
opt out. If you use the word opt out, it isn't gonna
When you pilot.
work.
Refuse to take the test. or
We
whatever you
refuse.
call it.
Was this over, did
Say it's
all the
objectionable
kids take it over a
material. Yes.
12-week period?
I'm sorry?
When you piloted the Smarter Balance, was
I
it over a 12-week
don't
period?
even know, because I just got back on the board, so.
Because when the test comes, it's over a 12-week period that this is administered. And one of the arguments against it is the fact that, the kids at the beginning have a disadvantage because, the other kids at the end get more instruction. So over a 12-week period. I would say that if you let your kids take this test, go sit in with them.
Yeah.
Go sit in with them, make sure, look at what's going on, because I gotta tell you, they're, especially the little kids, I think, you have more endurance as kids get older, they can sit in front of a computer screen, some of them may not even be bothered by it, but we're hearing across the country, this is not coming from me, I'm hearing this from parents who are just outraged that the kids are crying, and mostly little kids, because of the endurance factor to take something that maybe your kids did fine, and bravo to them, but I'm telling you that we're hearing from parents.
A lot.
So,
Isn't it a finite amount of time per day, isn't it, let's say, I'm just throwing this out, let's say the test takes 10 hours. I believe they administer it a couple hours per day over several days, they're not going to have this child sit down.
But for that child, it might be too much.
2 hours?
Why should 12 weeks is also, as
90
Lisa was
minutes?
saying,
or the
12 weeks.
ADD, ADHD kids, it is
Special ed kids.
extremely difficult for them to sit oftentimes in front of a computer. So you know your child best. Maybe your child doesn't mind. My kids, I have boys who love the computer. They probably wouldn't be bothered by it. My daughter hates the computer, and that might have been an issue for her, especially if she had some learning disabilities early on. So, it depends. But if you have any concerns and you're going to, let your kids go and sit with them, or at least monitor the classroom and go see if there's any, maybe your kids are going to be fine with it. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of kids that have
How's
not
that
been
gonna
fine.
sit with the school? Will they allow that?
I can't see why that would be a problem. Why would you not let a parent into the room when they're testing?
I'm from the
Stand outside the door, listen for your child if he's crying or not.
I live in this district, and I opted both my children out of the testing this spring. And I was told by the superintendent that I couldn't. But Peggy Robertson has a national opt-out website, and there's forms on there on how to just print out your form on how to refuse the test.
What is
It's
it
not-
called again? Because I haven't heard this.
I think her name is Peggy Robertson, and it's a national opt-out site.
And she works really hard putting together these forms, and it's by state.
Hmm.
And if you click on New Hampshire, you can print it out.
Yeah.
And I was told that I couldn't opt out, so I
Mhm.
went to her, and she said, you don't opt out, you refuse.
You refuse in this state.
But I did it very respectfully, because I like,
Yeah,
the
like your
principal at the school and all the teachers, and I said, "Well, I'm respectfully
Yeah.
refusing. And my
It doesn't have to
sixth
be
grader
bad.
was very happy, because he didn't like to take the test, and he went to the library
Right.
and read an entire book.
Exactly. Simple as that.
My
Because you
older
lose instruction
student,
time while they're testing.
my older, and then his friends high-fived him and said, how did you get out of this? And I had 3 faculty members at the school email me and say, thank you for doing that.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, and I just want to bring up something else about the tests, because this is where a lot of the data mining is, you know, we don't know what's on the test, but I can tell you the national tests used to ask personal questions. I mean, if you've looked at the NAEP, they've asked, you know, do you have a washer and dryer in the home, I think was one of the questions. So that's some of the concern. So if you're, you know, if they're not going to release the questions, you don't know what kind of questions, academic, non-academic questions are going to be out there. And then it leaves the school district. So that's some of the reasons people are opting out also, is because of, you know, what kind of personal information are they gathering on my family based on these assessments. Even if you're not, you know, maybe the academic part of it doesn't concern you. There's that other factor.
Dispositional.
One thing that I asked, we had a privacy bill this last legislative term, and it was introduced by Neil Kirk. And I went to the Senate Education Committee hearing, Nancy Stiles chairs that, and I said, can you put a provision in there that states that parents have to give their permission before any information leaves that school district to be shared, whether it go to the testing consortium, who is then required to share it with the federal government, or whether it's just something that the school is sharing, selling information. And that was not added to that bill. You have 2 school board members here. One of the things you should do as a community before anything else is go to them and ask for a policy that says your permission has to be granted before any non-academic personal information on you or your child or your family is removed from that school. Now, court order, you know, obviously there's going to be those situations. That's understandable. But parental consent was not added to that bill. So this information, the FERPA law was eviscerated. So that information can now leave without your knowledge or your consent. So you have school board members here, ask them to develop a policy that says that your consent has to be given before any information. And then that way, if the smarter balance is data mining information on your kids, you have a policy in place that says that this information cannot leave that school district without your permission.
But you can't do that for the Smarter Balance Adaptive Online
It's
test.
online.
They take the information, the online test takes your student information in order to give you the next question. Do you do well, do you not do well, and they pick a question. All that information that Smarter Balance gives, they have to, they are required to, give to the U.S. Department of Education. They don't need our permission. It's a funnel.
So at
So
the
you
state
keep that
level,
in
we
mind.
tried to put that into a law.
But we
that
can't
you would
unless
have
we
to
eliminate
consent.
the test.
Nobody did that. They wouldn't do that. So that's another thing, you know. But if it's a law, it's a law.
Then they would have to stop monitoring the online or administrating the online tests.
Yep.
Do you have a
What are
question?
the ages for the Smarter Balance test? What grade received the test? Or did
Three
they-
through eight, grade
Three through eight.
three through eight, and grade 11, I believe.
Say that again.
3 through 8.
3 through 8, and then grade 11.
3 through 8?
Yeah.
And 11.
Go ahead.
Hi, I have a daughter, she's in 1st grade, and I remember she told me by October, Mom, I went to lab computer and I took a test. And I had no idea. She said it was like math. Like, it was weird, it was very confusing. I said, well, what kind of questions did they ask you? I don't know. I wrote to her teacher and I asked her. My daughter said she took a test. She didn't know anything about this test. She didn't know she was going to have a test. And she said she didn't know many of the answers of this question. And she said, yeah, this is just like to see how I don't remember exactly the word, like how they are doing. It's not like a test for her
For grades.
Grades, right,
It's just like
Formative.
we just want to test how the kids are doing. Don't
don't worry about that, she's doing fine. But since that day I had that,
You have an instinct.
yes. And then last week, I received a letter from the principal. We live in Hampstead, I'm sorry, we live in Hampstead. I received a letter from the principal. Your daughter took this test, I don't remember what day, and this is the result of the test. And I said, I wanted to talk with the principal about this, like, I didn't know what questions was this test. And she said, she got level 1. It's like level 1 of how many, is this fine or what?
Right.
Yep.
What can I do about, what test is this? I don't even know what
Yep.
test is this.
That's what it is.
I don't know what test it is, but
Formative,
unfortunately, what you're having to learn is that you need to be proactive and when this kind of stuff happens, and to make sure that what questions you have, you do not get vague answers back. Vague answers, don't worry about it. Where all the kids are doing it, right, tells you nothing about what you asked, which was what was the test for, and why was she taking it.
And why'd she get a 1?
Right.
Yes.
Okay? So the vagueness is what you don't want.
Can I now go back to the principal and
Sure.
say, can I see this test?
They work for you.
They can give me the test,
Well,
right?
keep in mind, I don't think anybody up here is against testing. Quite frankly, my kids take a standardized test every year.
Right.
But I will tell you that they take an achievement test. They don't take an assessment.
Right.
She brought up that they're assessing dispositions, your attitudes, values, and beliefs. My kids have always taken an achievement
Right.
test. So if you refuse the assessment, there's other things that you can do. I mean, I personally want to know how my kids are doing.
Right.
So I would look at what the homeschoolers are using. The Iowa Basic Skills Test, the California Achievement Test, the Stanford Achievement Test. Make sure that they're non-common core aligned. Ask the homeschoolers, how can you get access to this test? And test your kids on your own. Take them to Sylvan or something like that. And if you really want that honest feedback, I did as a parent, I wanted it. But I think, this assessment hasn't even been validated yet. And when they validate it, I don't know, I really don't have a whole lot of confidence in who's going to validate. I don't even know who's validating this thing. This Iowa Basic Skills Test, the Stanford Achievement Test, that's been around for years. Has anybody have you ever heard a problem with those testing organizations? I mean, where parents are up in arms worrying about data mining, worrying about confusing questions, that sets their kids up for failure? No. They were just basically testing your kids on, do they know 2 + 2 = 4? And we don't care if they can explain it or not, because explaining an answer is not mathematical. So, please understand that I don't think anybody's against testing. But it has to be done, in this high-stakes testing where we're going to, evaluate teachers, and we're going to call these schools failing based on an assessment that hasn't even been validated.
And we can't even see.
And that we can't see. So do you see where that
Even
this
if
is
they
just
were wonderful, it's not the right approach.
Yeah, how
You need to
come
take
this
back
is
control.
being done this way? How come this is being done in this punitive,
Sinister
punitive
way.
schools? We went from punitive schools under No Child Left Behind to punitive teachers. And I'm glad the school board members are here and the teachers here, because I think it's important for you guys to decide how to evaluate the teachers, not the federal government, and not with them bribing us or blackmailing us with this waiver, that if you're not targeting that teacher over there, we're going to pull your waiver.
And your
that's
money.
what they're
And your
doing.
money.
And it's
That's what they're doing. If you're not, I mean, there's no guarantee. Our No Child Left Behind waiver expires when?
2015.
That may be part of the next. They
They're gonna
have to
have-
negotiate with the federal government.
Annually.
So what
to
you have
get
today
this
may not be
waiver.
what you have
They're
tomorrow.
negotiating our teachers with this
They
waiver.
said at one point that we would be able to get waivers for Smarter Balance. Londonderry 2 years ago asked for a waiver to it. They wanted to use some other test. All of a sudden now, they're waiting to the last minute to say, no, I'm sorry, you
Doesn't
can't.
work.
But they promised Manchester that they would develop their own standards, you can have your own evaluation. But they're not giving it, so maybe the next time they'll give it to us, but I don't see it, because
So
they're
what's
already
happening
starting to
now
push back.
could change. It could change very easily because of this waiver. This waiver is conditional every year, and we're seeing them pull back. They pulled back, the state of Washington, didn't they pull back their waiver?
They,
Is it the
they
state of
walked
Washington?
out, Washington walked out, they were.
Because they wouldn't go after their teachers.
They were the
So
top.
They
Georgia
would
too.
not go after their teachers, and they pulled their waiver.
Georgia as well.
George as well. So what we have in place right now, okay, we negotiated this, model teacher evaluation the way it is. That could change based on what the people up here are telling us. Now, good news, great news, we did get an article today where Bill Gates has said, maybe we need to delay evaluating teachers on.
He's afraid that it's gonna
Because
get
it's blowing up.
Of course.
Because it's blowing up. The king, the person we never elected, is now saying, so it'll be interesting to see what the federal government does because there's so much pushback. Will they listen to Bill Gates, who seems to be running our education system right now, and he has never been an educator and he knows nothing about, bravo to him on what he has accomplished. But that is who, there's an article that just came out about that.
today.
So this is
Pushing
what
it
this
back 2
all,
years.
I support teacher evaluations, please don't get me wrong, but I think you guys, your school board members, your administrators, and your teachers should all make sure that it's fair, that it's reasonable. If you want to tie a test, if you're okay with that, then you should have full confidence in that test. You should be able to see that. You should be able to sign off on it. And the Nashua teachers did not, because you know what? They're a Title I school, and they're coming after them, and they know it. They know
And
that
they're
their evaluation.
reluctantly accepting it because they feel they have no choice. They feel if they don't do it, they're acting illegally. And one school board member said they could arrest me and put me in jail. Is that frontwards or backwards? I mean, this is the school board that controls. They have the constitutional right to elect teachers and contract with them for their support and maintenance. The feds have nothing in their constitution.
They have it because we give it to them, we
It's
accede
all about
it.
the money.
But if they're a Title I school, they won't get any money, so you know.
I heard that they won't get a certain percentage of 1%. It's unclear.
And the federal government can take money out of other areas as well.
And
Sure,
I've
they
also
can, but-
heard that they threaten that,
I've
they've
had
never
U.S.
done it.
Department of Education employees tell me that's a veiled threat, that they don't withhold that money. So we've got these.
Well, giving it.
How much was taken away from No Child Left Behind? How many schools or how many states did they have money removed from No Child Left Behind?
Well, if you failed stuff, you got more money, I know that.
Yeah.
Right, so like, I don't understand
So
why
there
you
you
didn't pass stuff.
You're
Like
saying,
if you
it's
pass
true.
not,
So there you
get
go.
more money,
So
maybe
this-
more
Right.
people would have passed.
We have to be willing to say, at some level, we have to be willing to say, even under threat of you holding our funding, you will not take our power away from the
That's
local
easy
control.
to say, but even when you're on the
But what
school
are we
board,
gonna
you're one
do?
of five.
That's right, it's all about the money.
It
We're
is
back
about
to
the
where-
money.
We're all back to where it is.
It's a hard choice, to
Then
be
they-
sure.
It's about the money.
Yeah,
You
maybe
said, they
it's about
say,
money.
oh, we'll give you this kind of money.
I know.
If you
Do
do this kind of
this.
test. Oh, I have another question about you said half the country's gonna do the park and half's gonna do the smarter balance?
I don't know
So
if
how's
it's
that-
half and half.
How's that one common assessment then?
It's
Well,
not.
Pearson's writing
It's
both
not.
of them.
Yeah, can you get stock in Pearson's? That was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can.
And is Pearson's Power School?
It's a British company.
Pearson's is also Power School, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not real sure.
But it's not of this country, it's a
So College Board and Pearson, are they the same thing? College Board's not part of Pearson, is it?
College boards is separate.
College Board now, the College Board, the president of the College Board is now one of the chief architects of Common Core and
Right.
has no educational background.
None.
No
David Coleman?
education, yes, no education, so he's now in charge of the College Board. Again, they were looking for compliance, and they're gonna make sure that they put people in place and that they're putting their tentacles everywhere.
So
And
have you
states
tried
are
the
pushing
anti-monopoly idea?
Yeah, the monopoly over Pearson is shocking,
You're
shocking.
right.
You have a question back there?
Who is the local legal authority that signs a district onto Common Core standard?
The superintendent.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The superintendent, but your,
They have been
but your
de
school
facto
board is an
doing it.
overseer of your school. So,
So,
well, there's
my
a
last
person,
question, who is the local legal authority that can remove the Common Core standard?
School board.
And they have to hold the superintendent accountable to that.
Right.
And until
Which
we
is the
fire
people.
a
Right.
superintendent,
The people
nobody's
force
gonna.
the school board by coming
But I
out
will
and
tell you
forcing,
this, I
saying
think
no
if you're
more.
gonna do that, you need to also look at what's the alternative. You know, in Alton, there's, you know, what's the alternative? I think that, you know, as parents, you want good quality education. I don't think you just say no, 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 no.
Right.
You have to, you know, but your school board members should be, well, honestly, your superintendent should be leading on this. Your superintendent should be saying, you know what, here's what we told you.
No.
The superintendent, I'm shocked that no superintendent in the state has offered this information to people. It's really sad. But why you, how much are you paying your superintendent? Why are they not telling you this information? I mean, yeah, there's, I'm sure there's good and bad and everything, fine, present that. But why are they not telling you this information? Why did they not tell the school board? They just literally brought it in and nobody was, you know, even
It was
informed.
deliberate, it was by design.
So why is this, I've always wondered as a parent, as a taxpayer, why are these superintendents not standing up to you people who pay their salary and saying, you know what, we've looked at this, here's the good, here's the bad, I want to hear from you parents, I want to hear from you school board members, what do you think about this? Is this acceptable? Because it's not acceptable down the street at Phillips Exeter. And is there, you know, we know that there's something better. I would prefer to use this is what I would like to hear from a
But it's
superintendent,
easier
as
to
a
not.
mother,
Right.
as a mother.
They go along to get along, right?
It's just something that I would automatically expect, and it's really sad that I haven't seen it from one superintendent in the state.
They answer to Virginia Berry, the commissioner.
They take
That's
the
it.
money and relinquish the responsibility. Instead of developing it themselves,
There's no
they
leadership.
just take this money and say, here's the plan. They don't have to think, they're not responsible for the outcome. It's a lot easier for them.
It's a lot
And
easier.
they go to all these different meetings with the commissioner, and they're
But
told that's what
it
they're
is
supposed
hard
to
to
do.
say whether they all agree, because with teachers, I can tell you that I personally have many teachers, many school board members on my email list, and by the way, if you want on it, please let me know before we leave, because I do send out information, that do not support this. And the teachers cannot speak publicly. We did have one in Hooksett that recently spoke publicly and sent a letter to the Board of Education, really outlining. Now, she's in the elementary, and she really explains the math situation, because that's where we're seeing most of the developmentally inappropriate stuff is in the lower grades. So keep that in mind. If you're waiting on teachers to speak, they'll tell you, the ones that tell me at least, they face a hostile working environment.
Right.
They don't go into teaching to fight political battles. They go into teaching because they want to teach your kids. They love your kids. They want to teach them. They're not there to fight a political battle. And God bless the ones who do stand up and say something, because, boy, they're doing it in New York right now. They're calling for the commissioner's resignation, by the way, in New York over this.
We should do the same in New Hampshire. Absolutely.
So, and again, these are teachers who thought that this was all great when it first came in. They were totally sold on it. Totally sold on it.
And we
are
don't know
flipping.
what percentage of the teacher evaluation will be tied to the test. New Hampshire has the 20%, but it's voluntary because we have that constitutional amendment. In New York, it's 40%.
In Colorado, it's 50%.
So it depends on the waiver, what comes from year to year, what kind of push there's gonna be.
All right, so I moved here to town, to Brentwood, 15 years ago. I didn't have any kids there. The 14-year-old's my oldest. The reason I moved to this town was because of the school system. So Common Core makes it now, I can move to Raymond or Fremont, somewhere that has a lesser system, pay lesser taxes, and get the same
Get the same thing.
I'm going to disagree with that because it comes down to the teacher and how comfortable the teacher is with the material and how good the teacher is at teaching and working with the curriculum's not the textbook, it's what the teacher and the districts create to meet whatever they have to meet for that year.
You're absolutely right, but the system.
We've been teaching to the same standards for years. So, under the kneecaps, we had the same standards as Raymond and other people. It really boils down to the teacher, so I would say take a close look at your teacher.
How much professional development do you get in Brentwood? Because I know we get a lot in Manchester. Oh, I'm sorry.
I live in Brentwood, but I don't teach in Brentwood. I get a lot of personal development.
Professional
I
development.
will say this about New Hampshire, though. New Hampshire, again, their math standards, and this is coming from the Commissioner of Education. Virginia Berry at a public meeting said that our math standards that she was teaching to were at a D level, okay? Very low level. So if your kids were proficient on a kneecap, that was at a D level. What that means is that in New Hampshire, your kids could have been proficient, but you cross that border to Massachusetts where the math standards were at an A level, and your child might not have been proficient in Massachusetts. That was the big secret kind of thing that, you know, nobody really knew about. So, yes, they've been teaching to standards. They've been teaching possibly to maybe some lousy standards, but hopefully as a teacher, they saw that and elevated it. But you don't know that unless you know that that teacher is doing above and beyond. The best thing you can do is go look at, go pull up, and you can do this on a website, go look at the California math standards. Okay, bring that up, pull that up, the old California math standards. Print them off. Okay, these are considered the best in the country, and go through grade 1, wherever your kids are at, and go see if your kids have learned it. Not just learned it, because I can tell you, and I'm sure that the teacher will back me up, but they may learn it, but they've also have to master it. Okay, so that comes through practice.
But the other thing
But you can look at those standards, quality standards, and see what, and these would prepare kids for Algebra 1 by 8th grade. Again, Common Core, now your kids are getting to it by 9th grade, so there's a slow progression to fall behind under the Common Core standards. So if you're teaching to those standards, that's what's happening. Not to take away from quality teachers, God bless them, but if they're covering this material in this year, they're covering those standards in that year, they're falling behind, regardless of how great your teacher is, because if they're teaching to those standards, eventually they're going to fall behind your international peers.
But the other thing you have to keep with this new system, they label your teachers effective and ineffective. They're going to start trying to move the ineffective teachers out and reposition the effective teachers, because they want all schools to have the same result.
Uniformity.
Uniformity. They don't want gaps. That's a focus school. If you've got too many gifted students that are testing well, and there's a disparity between the top and the bottom, that's a problem school.
That's a big problem.
Needs to be remediated. The whole point is to have the same outcome everywhere. So I don't know how, 5 years down the line, are they going to take this wonderfully effective teacher and put her someplace else where she's more needed, where they have ineffective teachers, and swap them back and forth? Because that's the mindset of these people creating this system. And if we let them keep going, we won't have the local control to push back. Yeah?
My last point, I think,
Yeah, we probably should wrap this
It
up.
seems
Is
to
the
be
place
that-
closed?
Oh, you dropped something there on my
Oh,
last
wallet.
So maybe one more question? Did you have one more question? Oh, did you have one more question?
Yeah, basically the people who are making these decisions are not the ones that have the kids in public schools.
That's right.
It's your Bill Gates and your
Yes.
politicians.
That's
it's
right, they don't
private
put their kids in
schools.
a public school.
They get you don't get, the Michelle Obama, the school lunches, they get their own private chefs, and
Right.
these are the people, so it's not so much to attack the teaching, I think they get some get defensive, but if the people who are making decisions, like Hassan, who kids go to Exeter, Phillips Academy, they don't have kids in public schools.
That's right.
Correct.
Who's the headmaster at,
Phillips.
Phillips Exeter Academy?
Governor Hasson's husband.
Oh,
Governor Hasson's husband.
so now I know why they don't have Common Core.
But I will say, in defense, Phillips Exeter is very aware of the Common Core, and they do make sure that what they cover. But Phillips Exeter also does the roundtable approach, and that's where it's explain, and they only take the top of the kids. It's extremely hard.
Can you
So-
explain why you no gap problem?
I use Phillips Exeter problems all the time
It's a
in my algebra
Socratic
class.
method. I understand what the round table is. It's a Socratic
Yeah.
method. It's constructivism. I fully understand how they teach, and you're right, they teach the cream of the crop there. And so, and I think you're referencing teaching methods, pedagogy versus the standards.
They're not doing that assessment. And that
Yeah.
assessment on every level is something that we should push back on because it doesn't help anybody.
But that's the thing I think we need to take into account. The testing is a whole separate issue than the standards, and we're not making it separate. We gotta learn to keep them separate.
It is not separate, you can't say that, because it is the thing that drives the entire concept of Common Core.
If we
Everything goes to the test.
If we defeat the test, the whole thing folds. We
Right.
can pick our own standards, our own curriculum. Every district can refuse and reject Common Core, that's true. So the key to defeating this thing is to
Testing.
refuse or get rid of the test.
But you want to make sure
control
that
it.
you're not pulling in another Common Core test, because other states have rejected the Smarter Balance or the PARC. And I had a state school board member in a different state tell me, Amory, watch it. Because if they pull out a Smarter Balance, they may pull something in like the ACTs, which are going to be
Yeah.
Common Core aligned. So keep that in mind.
they
that
are.
you might, we got rid of Smarter Balance. If the governor announces, or the commissioner, because I think that they are looking at some alternatives. but
Yeah.
They're not going to look at
They're not
Common Core
looking, they're looking
alternatives.
to the US Department of Ed for permission for
permission.
alternatives,
Yes.
which is totally different. But if we pass a statute that says, we're not doing an annual assessment, we're doing an annual achievement test, we could forego, and change the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
So there's many ways.
Or at least give your school an alternative. How about saying, Brentwood, you have this alternative test that you can use. Why not? It's an achievement test. We're not saying, don't test your kids. Why not allow that? We have to allow that now.
No,
We have
it's
to
not
pass a
allowed. We've
law.
got to push back.
Right.
I mean, I understand that they have to be tested, and we're not against that, but can we at least maybe give some alternatives? Alton rejected Common Core. Why should they be forced to use a Common Core assessment? Why can't they say, I want to use the, Stanford Achievement Test, something that's time-tested, been around forever, doesn't have a controversy around it. The federal government's not funding it, so then you have to, wonder about that. It's crazy that the way the system has been rolled out, and that you as a school board member can't say, we want to use this achievement test.
Are those enough aligned? Iowa and Stanford
Iowa
and
does have a
California,
Common
are they
Core.
enough aligned?
Iowa does have a Common Core aligned
Stanford doesn't.
test, but they also still have their old test that is not Common Core aligned.
But is it, we're not doing trick questions in Common Core, so.
Well, I would say they are.
Well,
You
maybe
absolutely
we
are.
As a
We
math
don't know
person,
yet.
I
We
would
have
say
to
they
see.
are. I've looked
You
at it.
haven't seen the test, then you
I
won't
like
see the
Smart
test.
Balance with a butter, but,
Was it what?
with a butter, there's like a butter that's called Smarter Balance or.
Oh, yes, there is one. There's a margin.
How do you keep saying you can't look at the test?
Yeah, you don't know what's on it.
Well, how do you keep saying you just
They-
said you looked at the
they
test?
give
Sample
sample
questions
Oh,
on the
So you
website.
can't
You
look
can
at the
take the
test. You
sample.
don't know
sample
what
Those are
questions.
filtered out.
You can
That's
have
not
a
what's
sample
gonna be on the
test
test.
on their website. It's the whole sample test,
Yes.
so you start with one question and you have to go all the way through to the end.
So that's not what's going to be on. They're not going to put that out there and then put that on the test.
Right,
Right,
and
well,
the
that's what I'm
test-
saying, you kept saying that you
Okay.
couldn't look at it,
Right,
but then
there
you
are-
said, I've looked at the test.
Yes.
There have
sample
been,
question.
there have been questions too that have been leaked, from many states of the actual test itself, either pictures were taken or the copies of the test were leaked. So we have seen, and you can find them on the internet, some actual questions, which is what has driven the discussion, because they see that was an actual question. And that's what's started, I think, this ball rolling. Scary stuff.
So could you say, okay, we want, because you said the test had to be valid, appropriate, and objectively
Scored.
scored. So could you say, as a school board member, we want to have the Iowa or the California or the Stanford
Yeah.
achievement test
Yeah.
in our waiver instead of
If
the
you were
scored?
writing the waiver, but the problem is you got the Department of Education in New Hampshire writing everybody's waiver. That is the problem. You should be able to say that. You should be able to say as a board, prove to me that they're verified, prove to me that they're appropriate, and prove to me that they're objectively
Now
scored.
they're going to say that is.
They're gonna lie.
They're going to say it's valid. Once
not proof
once
to
it's been
grandma.
validated, they're going to say, well, it's validated now. But you have the Manchester mayor. I mean, honestly, if you want to fight against the Smarter Balance, you have the Manchester mayor who is furious right now that his school has to use the Smarter Balance. And we went to a school board meeting 2 nights ago, and he is ready to wage a fight with the Department of Education to get Manchester out of Smarter Balance.
Good.
So,
What is he proposing instead, though?
I mean,
He doesn't have
that's
a
a good
proposal,
question.
but he
I
has
don't know
hundred
yet.
and five different languages in his city, in
Yeah.
his schools. So he's got an exceptional case, and he doesn't wanna be straitjacketed into this small, untested assessment.
I don't know that. But, you know, that's a good, go to your legislators. I want a piece of legislation that says that you guys, your school board members, get to choose the test that you're gonna use in your district. You're still testing your kids, so you're still meeting the requirement. There's a law that says that you have to test your kids.
Well, it's
So
just
you're still
statewide.
meeting that requirement, but why can't you choose that? Why can't you sit down with your teachers and say, we wanna look at all of these tests, especially if she's gonna be evaluated on it, and we want their input on what they feel is a fair test of their kids' academic knowledge.
There's
So-
also a legal brief that came out of Nashville when the school board members asked it. And again, it was a stilted thing where they said that, you know, we lose our money. It's all about the money. They said, is it an unfunded mandate? Oh, no, of course, because we were gonna spend money in some general sense anyway. But every question you ask, like they gave a letter from Smarter Balance to say how there was no dispositional questions on the test, even though it's still on the website that they're, it defies logic. There's no consistency that it's crazy. But join together and push back on every different level, whether it's the state legislature, whether it's the State Board of Education. All these different levels are at your disposal. So push back wherever you can while you can.
You do have to push back, but the question is why? Why do you have to fight this? If you want something better in your district, you need to ask your school board members, you need to ask the superintendent, why do we have to fight? Why are we not coming together as a community to support something better? Now, maybe it won't be a fight. You know what? You might get good school board members who say, you know what? We got it. We understand it. We want something better for our kids too. Let's work together. But if it is a fight, you might want to ask yourself, why? You're the parents. These are your kids. Why do you have to fight a school? And they're doing it in Hollis, by the way. Hollis put a ballot issue out there for voters. Do you want Common Core? And the voters said no. The voters said no, they do not want, they want something better. On the 16th, they have 2 state representatives who's going to hold a forum on Common Core, telling the parents why Common Core is good for their kids, and the school's going to tell them why the Common Core is good. These parents have to fight. They've already spoken. They've spoken and said they want something better. Why do they have to fight? And I keep asking the Hollis parents, why do you have to fight? Why is this, you put it on the ballot, the voters spoke, it's non-binding, I got it, so you can't,
Oh.
but these are your representatives. These are the people you elect to your school board. Why does this have to be a fight? I personally don't think it should be a fight. This should be something as a community, you come together and say, we want something better. We want to look out for our teachers. We want to make sure that, they're being assessed or evaluated in a fair way. We want to make sure that our kids are getting quality standards and that they're not developmentally inappropriate. And that we want something that puts them on a track with Phillips Exeter or Singapore, because there's no reason that they shouldn't be. They're not born into genius. Okay, I'm a math person. I can tell you that if you give them arithmetic, they can get there. They can compete with those kids. There's no reason they can't. So this shouldn't be a fight. Unfortunately, sometimes it is, but it shouldn't be.
But there's many districts that are pushing back. Alton, Dover, Londonderry, Nashua.
Wakefield.
Wakefield said no.
and Manchester.
No Common Core in Wakefield.
Right.
So get together, find more school districts.
And if there's representatives or senators or school board members not listening to you, then you replace them.
Make it
And then
make
you
it an
make
election
sure that
issue.
somebody is doing what you want them to do, because they're your representatives. They're supposed to be representing you. That's how they did it in Alton.
I've got people who I'm from Hampstead again, and I have no idea about this Common Core. I'm from Mexico also, so I didn't grow up here.
Yep.
I don't know anything about the school system. And I didn't know about Common Core until somebody posted something on Facebook. That's how I knew about it. Good. So maybe parents don't know about this.
They don't.
No, they
Nope,
don't.
they don't.
You have?
That's why we
we do. We try.
That's why we
come
come.
to our town to
Yes.
maybe inform us about
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
come again if you need
So I know, I'm afraid we're gonna get kicked out.
Okay.
And thank you, thank your school board members for coming.
Thank you.
Because a lot of them won't even show up. Yeah. Administrators will not show up.
Did you
So bravo to them.
not want me to use the camera?
Well, I just, I know, like, because I'm in